The snow had stopped falling an hour ago, but the cold hadn't gotten the message. It hung in the air over Colorado Springs like something solid, something with weight. 42 degrees and dropping. The kind of cold that found the gaps in your jacket and reminded you that November didn't care about your plans or your comfort or the fact that you'd been riding since Pueblo and your back had been complaining about it for the last 30 miles. Cole Mercer didn't mind the cold. He'd stopped minding it somewhere around his third winter on the road back when he was young enough to think that not minding things made you tough. Now at 50 years old, he just accepted it. Cold was part of the deal. You rode in it, you lived with it, you kept moving until you found somewhere warm, or you didn't. Simple as that. The Harley beneath him was running smooth. That was good. The road ahead was empty except for the occasional car heading somewhere that wasn't here. That was better. Cole had learned a long time ago that the best rides were the ones where nothing happened, where you just put miles behind you and thoughts in front of you and let the engine do the work of holding you together. Tonight, though, the thoughts weren't cooperating. He'd spent the last 6 days dealing with chapter business, disputes mostly, territory disagreements with a club out of Denver that thought they had a claim to a bar and monument that they absolutely did not have a claim to, phone calls that went nowhere, meetings that accomplished less, the slow, grinding machinery of keeping 142 men organized and pointed in roughly the same direction without anybody getting arrested or shot or stupid enough to make the news. Cole was good at it. He'd been doing it for 11 years, ever since the previous president had died in an accident outside Cheyenne. That wasn't really an accident, but also wasn't something anybody talked about anymore. The Rocky Mountain Charter of the Hells Angels was his. The patch on his back said so. The 16 men who reported directly to him said so. The state lines and the clubhouses and the reputation that made people cross the street when they saw him coming, all of that said so. But tonight, riding through the empty streets of Colorado Springs at 10:15 on a Thursday night, Cole wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about a conversation he had had 3 weeks ago with a woman he hadn't seen in 27 years, Diane Reston. She'd been Diane Mercer once, back when she was his sister, and back when their last name still meant something to either of them besides a shared history they'd both spent decades trying to forget. She called him out of nowhere, which she did exactly once a year on his birthday and never any other time, except this wasn't his birthday. This was 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, and when he'd answered the phone and heard her voice, his first thought had been that someone was dead. Nobody was dead. That was the first thing she'd said. Nobody's dead, Cole. I'm just calling because I thought you should know that I've been thinking about Sarah lately, and I thought maybe you have too, Sarah. The name sat in Cole's chest like something that had never fully healed, like a bone that had been set wrong and just ached forever. Sarah Mercer, his little sister, 14 years old the last time he had seen her alive. 17 when she decided that the world was too much and the people in it were too cruel, and the best thing she could do was stop being in it. Cole hadn't been there. He'd been in prison serving 2 years for aggravated assault. The assault in question had been against their mother's boyfriend, a man named Dennis Carver, who'd thought that hitting a 14-year-old girl was an acceptable way to express his frustration with the world. Cole had walked into their apartment in Durango, seen the bruise on Sarah's face, listened to her try to explain that she'd tripped, heard Dennis in the next room laughing at something on television, and made a decision that had cost him 2 years of his life and every relationship he'd had before or since. He'd beaten Dennis Carver so badly that the man had spent 3 weeks in the hospital and another 6 months learning to walk again. Cole had been arrested at the scene. He hadn't run, hadn't tried to. The arresting officer had asked him if he understood what he'd done, and Cole had said yes. Had asked him if he regretted it, and Cole had said no. Their mother had testified against him at the trial, had stood up in front of a judge and said that Cole had always been violent, had always been trouble, that she tried her best, but some children just couldn't be helped. She'd chosen Dennis over her own son, and when Cole had been sentenced, she'd been in the courtroom holding Dennis's hand. Sarah had gone into foster care. Cole had written her letters from prison every week, but the letters had been returned unopened. The state didn't allow contact between minors in the system and convicted felons, even if the felon was their brother, even if the felon had been trying to protect them. When Cole got out, Sarah was gone. Not dead yet, just gone. Moved to a different home, a different city. The system wouldn't tell him where. Privacy laws, they said. For her protection, they said. So Cole had looked for her the only way he knew how, which was the hard way. Talked to people, followed leads, spent every dollar he had that wasn't going toward keeping himself alive. He found her 3 years later. Found her grave anyway. Sarah Ann Mercer, 2001 to 2018, 17 years old. The groundskeeper at the cemetery told him she'd been buried by the state, no service, no family, just a plot and a stone and a date that said she'd stopped existing on a Tuesday in March. Cole had stood at that grave for 2 hours, hadn't cried, hadn't said anything, had just stood there with his hands in his pockets and his jaw locked tight and something inside him shutting down that he'd never quite managed to turn back on. That was 32 years ago. Cole was 19 then. He was 50 now. He'd built a life in those 32 years or something that looked like a life if you didn't examine it too closely. He'd joined the Hells Angels 6 months after finding Sarah's grave because he'd needed something larger than himself to be part of, and because he'd already decided that the world was divided into people who had power and people who didn't, and he was never going to be powerless again. He'd worked his way up, proved himself, earned the patch, earned the rank, earned the respect of men who didn't give respect easily. He'd made decisions that kept people alive and decisions that did the opposite. He'd built a reputation that preceded him into every room he entered. He was Cole Mercer, president of the Rocky Mountain Charter, a man you didn't cross, didn't challenge, didn't underestimate. But he'd never had a family, never married, never had kids, never led anyone close enough to matter. Because the last time he'd loved someone, really loved someone, he'd failed to protect her, and she'd ended up in the ground at 17. Diane's phone call had opened all of that back up. I've been thinking about Sarah. Like it was a casual thing, like thinking about their dead sister was something you just did sometimes between grocery shopping and watching television. Cole hadn't known what to say. He'd settled on, yeah, me too. They'd talked for 11 minutes. Diane had told him she was living in Boulder, now had 2 kids, was divorced, was working as a paralegal. She'd asked him what he was doing, and he'd told her the truth, which was riding a motorcycle and running a club and trying not to think too hard about anything that happened before he turned 20. She'd said, "You know it wasn't your fault, right, Sarah? You know that wasn't on you." And Cole had said, "I know," even though he didn't, even though every part of him knew exactly whose fault it was. The conversation had ended with Diane saying she'd call again sometime, and Cole saying sure, and both of them knowing it was a lie, but performing it anyway, because that's what families did when they'd broken each other too badly to fix. Now riding through Colorado Springs with the cold pressing in and the engine vibrating up through his hands, Cole was thinking about that conversation, was thinking about Sarah's face the way it had looked at 14, with the bruise on her jaw that she tried to hide, was thinking about the grave with no flowers, no visitors, no evidence that she'd mattered to anyone. He was thinking about how you carry the dead with you, whether you want to or not. The radio in his helmet crackled. Logan's voice flat and efficient. Merc. Cole didn't slow down, just keyed the mic. Yeah. Alley, left side, 100 yards back. Cole's hands were already moving before his brain caught up, turning the bike, cutting back the way they'd come. He didn't ask what Logan had seen. Logan didn't make calls like that unless there was something worth calling. They'd been riding together for 11 years. Logan Hayes, 37 years old, built like a fence post, with eyes that caught details other people missed and a face that didn't show much of anything. Cole had saved Logan's life outside a bar in Durango, back when Logan was 26 and drunk enough to mouth off to the wrong people. Cole had stepped in, ended the situation before it got fatal, and Logan had been riding off his left shoulder ever since. It made Logan occasionally irritating in the way that people who owe you their lives can be always trying to balance a debt that can't really be balanced. But it also made him reliable in a way that Cole had learned not to take for granted. When Logan said there was something in an alley worth looking at, there was something in an alley worth looking at. Cole pulled up to the mouth of the alley, killed the engine, swung his leg off the bike. The sudden silence was loud. No cars, no voices, just the ambient hum of a city at night that wasn't quite asleep but wasn't paying attention either. The alley was narrow, badly lit, one overhead light flickering like it was negotiating with the darkness about how much ground to give up. Dumpsters on the left, cardboard boxes stacked against the right wall, trash scattered across pavement that was slick with something Cole didn't want to identify. And movement, low to the ground, behind a cardboard box that had been pushed against the wall like a fort, like a hiding place, like the only shelter a very small person could find. Cole took 3 steps forward, stopped. His hand didn't go to his knife, didn't go to anything. He just stood there letting his eyes adjust, letting whatever was behind that box understand that he wasn't moving fast, wasn't being aggressive. Hey, his voice came out low, automatic, the voice he used when things needed to stay calm. I'm not going to hurt you. Silence. Logan appeared at his shoulder, said nothing, just stood there, a presence, backup that didn't need to be explained. Cole crouched down, all 6'4" of him folding toward the ground until he was close to eye level with whatever was behind that box. He could see it now. A shoe, small, pink, dirty, in a hand. Tiny fingers curled around the edge of the cardboard, gripping it like it was the only solid thing in the world. I can see you, Cole said quietly. And that's okay. You don't have to come out. But I need you to tell me you're all right. Nothing for 5 seconds. 10. Then a sound that hit Cole somewhere behind his sternum and didn't let go. A whimper. Soft. Exhausted. The kind of sound a child makes when they have already cried everything out and don't have anything left. Cole sat down on the wet pavement, right there, in the alley, in his cut with his patches and his rings and 50 years of road on him. He just sat down and waited. Logan. He kept his voice barely above a whisper. Don't call anybody yet. He could feel Logan's hesitation, could feel the argument forming. But Logan stepped back, gave him space. Cole leaned his forearms on his knees and looked at the cardboard box. My name is Cole, not Merc, not his road name. Cole. He hadn't introduced himself that way to a stranger in 15 years. I ride motorcycles. I know I probably look pretty scary right now. I know that. You don't have to trust me, but I'm going to stay right here until you're ready to talk. I've got nowhere else to be. That was a lie, technically, but it was the truest thing he'd said in months. Another 10 seconds passed. 15. The flickering light above them buzzed, settled, and then the cardboard shifted. A face appeared. A little girl's face. 7, maybe 8 years old. Hollow cheeks, pale lips, dark circles under eyes that were too large and too old for the face they were set in. Her hair was matted, tangled, dirty, and there was a bruise along her left jaw that made Cole's chest go very, very tight. She was wearing a thin jacket, a child's jacket, completely wrong for a 42-degree night. She was shaking so hard Cole could see it from 3 feet away. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then she said in a voice like cracked paper, "Are you going to take me back to her?" Cole felt the question land. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he knew enough. "No," he said, "I'm not. I promise you that." The girl stared at him. Something moved through her face. Not trust, not yet, but something closer to the possibility of trust. The first crack in a wall that had been built out of necessity. "My name is Evelyn," she said, "but people call me Evie." "Evie," Cole repeated. "That's a good name," she nodded, very small, like she needed to hear it confirmed. "How long have you been out here, Evie?" She thought about it. "Since this morning, maybe before this morning. I don't know." Cole kept his voice level. "Are you hungry?" "I had some crackers." She held up the cardboard box slightly, and he could see it now. A small box of Ritz crackers, half empty, and next to it, a stuffed rabbit, gray, well-worn, one ear drooping at an angle that suggested a long history of being loved very hard. Good thinking, Cole said, bringing food. She looked at him with those two old eyes. I brought the crackers because I was scared I'd be out here for a long time. Something shifted in Cole's chest, some internal structure that he'd spent a long time building very carefully. He felt the first crack run through it. Why were you scared of that? He asked. Evie looked at the rabbit in her lap. Because nobody was going to look for me. The words sat in the alley between them like something physical. Cole waited, didn't push, just sat there on the wet pavement with the cold seeping through his jeans and his cut and into his bones, and he waited. It took another 6 minutes to get the full story, not because Evie was reluctant. She told it in the disjointed way that children that tell the worst things that have happened to them, jumping between details like stones across water, sometimes landing steady, and sometimes slipping. Cole listened to every word. He did not let his face show what he was feeling because he had learned long ago in rooms full of hard men that a face that showed too much could stop a person from continuing. Evie's mother had died 14 months ago. Breast cancer, she said, in the matter-of-fact way that children describe catastrophic things because they don't yet have the full vocabulary for grief. After that, she'd gone to live with her father, and her father had a girlfriend. The girlfriend's name was Vanessa. She seemed okay at first, Evie said. She bought me a new backpack. It had butterflies on it. That sounds nice, Cole said. It was. Evie paused. Then she stopped being nice. Cole said nothing, just waited. She started saying things. That I was in the way, that my dad liked me better than her, that I was a problem. Evie's voice was very flat now, the flatness of a child who has been told something often enough that they've started to believe it. She hit me once, but I fell, so my dad thought I just fell. She told him I had fallen before I could say anything. Cole's jaw tightened. He didn't move, didn't change his expression. Today she told me she had a surprise for me, a new school. She said Dad had agreed to try a new school and she was going to take me to see it. Evie looked up. I wanted to believe her. I really wanted it to be true. You couldn't have known, Cole said. She drove me to the street, told me to go down the alley and look for the red door. She said the school had a special entrance like it was for special kids. Evie's chin trembled just slightly before she pulled it back under control. I went in. There was no door. There was just the alley, and when I turned around, her car was gone. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Cole had heard in years. Nobody came, Evie said. I yelled for a while. Then I stopped because it made my throat hurt. Then I found the box, and I stayed here because it was warmer in the corner. Cole looked at her for a long moment, at the bruise, at the thin jacket, at the crackers and the rabbit and the face of a 7-year-old who had decided somewhere in that alley that no one was coming for her and that the best she could do was survive the night with what she had. He thought about his own childhood. He thought about Sarah. He thought about a lot of things. Then he stood up. Okay, he said, here's what's going to happen. Evie flinched, just a small one, a tightening of the shoulders when he stood. Cole saw it, and it almost broke something in him completely. I'm not going to hurt you, he said again. He meant it as a reminder. He also meant it as a promise. But I need to get you somewhere warm. You're too cold and you've been out here too long. I'm going to call an ambulance. No, it came out fast and hard, more force than he expected from that small voice. Cole blinked. Evie, he started. No ambulance. Her eyes were wide now, and there was something in them that hadn't been there before. Not fear exactly, something older, something that had been put there by someone who had told her what happened when you called for help. Vanessa said if I ever called anyone, she would tell them I was crazy. She said they'd believe her. She said they'd send me somewhere bad. Evie stopped. Her hands were shaking. not just from the cold. Cole crouched back down, level with her. Vanessa isn't here, he said. Vanessa doesn't have a say in this. Vanessa left you in an alley in 42-degree weather and drove away. He paused. Whatever Vanessa told you, I need you to set it aside right now, just for tonight. And trust me, can you do that? Evie stared at him. She was weighing something. He could see it happening behind her eyes. Some calculation that a 7-year-old should never have had to make. You don't look trustworthy, she said. It startled a sound out of Cole that he hadn't made in so long he almost didn't recognize it. Not quite a laugh, something close. No, he said. I know I don't. You have a skull on your jacket, I do. And a lot of tattoos, I won't argue that. Evie looked at the rabbit, then at him, then at the rabbit again. Then she said, My mom said you shouldn't judge people by how they look. Your mom sounds like a smart woman. She was. Evie's voice dropped to almost nothing on the last word. She really was. Cole stayed very still. Then let's honor that, he said quietly. Let's let her be right. Logan appeared at his shoulder again. Cole stood and the two men stepped just far enough away that Evie couldn't hear them clearly, but close enough that Cole could still see her. Ambulance is 12 minutes out minimum, Logan said low and fast. Weather's dropping. She's hypothermic murk. Look at her lips. Cole had already looked. The color was wrong. Pale, moving toward blue at the edges. We're not waiting 12 minutes. You want to put a half-frozen 7-year-old on the back of a Harley St. Matthews is 4 minutes from here. Logan stared at him. This is insane. Yep, the hospital staff is going to lose their minds. Probably. The cops are going to have questions. They can get in line. Cole turned back toward Evie. I'm going to take her myself. You ride behind us. Call ahead to the hospital. Tell them what's coming. What exactly do I tell them is coming? Cole looked at him evenly. Tell them a child needs emergency care. That's all they need to know right now. Logan pressed his mouth into a thin line, the expression he made when he disagreed but had already decided to comply. He pulled out his phone. Cole walked back to Evie, crouched down one more time. Okay, he said. I'm going to carry you to my motorcycle. I know that sounds terrifying. I'm going to hold you very carefully, and I'm going to get you to a hospital in 4 minutes. And I need you to hold on to me the whole time. Can you do that? Evie looked at the motorcycle visible at the mouth of the alley, then at Cole. I've never been on a motorcycle, she said. First time for everything. She thought about it for one more second. Then she reached up. Small arms, the arms of a child who had been deliberately not held by the people who were supposed to hold her, and she wrapped them around his neck. Cole stood up slowly, carefully, keeping her pressed against his chest and tucking his cut around her as best he could. She was light in a way that hollowed him out. She smelled like cold air and cardboard, and something underneath that was just childhood. Just a little kid. Just a little girl who had been left in an alley by someone who was supposed to love her. He walked toward the bike. Her face was buried in his shoulder. She was still shaking. He could feel it moving through her whole small body, and he tightened his arms slightly in response, trying to give her something solid to push against. You still with me? He asked. Yes, she said into his jacket. Don't drop me. I'm not going to drop you. She was quiet for a second. Then, do you promise Cole Mercer, chapter president, road veteran man, who hadn't made a casual promise to anyone in over a decade, said without hesitation? Yeah, Evie, I promise. He rode faster than he should have and slower than he wanted to. Every instinct in him was screaming to push it to get her there faster, to close the distance between that alley and those hospital doors in half the time. But she was on the bike with him, and she was small, and she was already fragile in ways he couldn't yet fully measure. So he rode hard and controlled, and he kept one arm wrapped around her at all times, and every red light felt like a sentence. Evie didn't speak during the ride, but she didn't let go either. She kept her face tucked against him, and every few seconds he could feel her grip tighten slightly, just slightly, as though she was reminding herself that he was still there. He was still there. 4 minutes and 40 seconds after leaving the alley, Cole Mercer pulled his motorcycle to the entrance of St. Matthew's Hospital. He kicked the stand, swung off with Evie still in his arms, and walked through those sliding glass doors without slowing down. The emergency room was mid-chaos, the standard Thursday night rotation of bad decisions and bad luck that every emergency room in America ran on after 10 in the evening. There were people in plastic chairs, a television mounted in the corner running the news on mute, a man with a towel pressed to his forehead, a woman quietly crying on her phone. Everyone stopped when Cole walked in. It was the patch partly. It was always the patch. But mostly it was the combination of a man built like a freight train, dressed like every warning label anyone had ever been given, about dangerous people holding a barely conscious child wrapped in a leather vest, like she was the most important thing he had ever touched. A nurse at the station, young maybe 26 badge reading Martinez, stood up so fast her chair rolled into the wall behind her. "Sir," she started. "Her name is Evelyn Morrison," Cole said. His voice was completely steady. "She's 7 years old. She's been outside in the cold for approximately 36 hours. She's hypothermic, possibly more. She has a bruise on her left jaw that didn't come from a fall." He stopped at the desk. "I need a doctor. Right now, not in a minute. Right now." Martinez stared at him, at the child, back at him. "Where did you—" she began. "I found her in an alley on 5th and Cascade. I will answer every question you have. But first, doctor." Now, for 1 second, just one, Martinez looked like she was going to argue. Then Evie made a sound. Small, weak. A sound that crossed every boundary and landed in the chest of every person in that room who heard it. Martinez reached for the intercom. "Trauma 2, pediatric hypothermia presenting now." Cole exhaled, just once, slow and controlled. "Thank you," he said. And somewhere behind him, Logan Hayes pushed through the sliding doors and came to stand at Cole's shoulder without a word. Because that was what Logan did. That was what Logan had always done. And some things about the life were actually genuinely worth keeping. They took Evie from his arms in the doorway of Trauma 2, and Cole let them. He didn't follow. He knew better than to follow. He stood in the hallway as the door swung closed, and he listened to the sound of medical voices, calm, professional, trained, and he tried to remember how to breathe at a normal rate. Logan stood next to him, said nothing for a full minute. Then, "She going to be okay?" "She has to be," Cole said. It wasn't an answer, but it was the only one he had. He walked back to the waiting room, sat down in one of the plastic chairs, the only open one wedged between a teenager texting and an older man asleep with his mouth open. And he put his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands, and he just sat there. His phone had 7 missed calls, 2 from chapter leadership, 3 from a number he didn't recognize. 1 from Diane, which meant she'd seen something or heard something or sensed something across the miles that connected siblings even when they barely spoke. And 1 from Logan, probably from when he'd been riding. He didn't answer any of them. He sat in that plastic chair in a hospital waiting room at 11:15 on a Thursday night, in a building full of people who were all afraid of him, and he thought about a little girl who had told him he didn't look trustworthy, and whose mother had apparently taught her not to judge people by their appearances, and who had held on to him the entire 4-minute ride like he was the only solid thing left in the world. Nobody came to ask him to leave. Nobody came to ask him anything. A doctor appeared eventually, older, silver-haired, a face that had seen everything and still managed to look tired. He looked at Cole, looked at the patch, looked at Cole again. "You brought her in." "Yes, she's stable. We're warming her. She's going to need fluids and monitoring," but he paused. "You got to her in time." Cole nodded once. His throat was doing something inconvenient. "Good," he said. That was all he could manage. The doctor looked at him for a long moment, like he was trying to solve something. "Then the police are going to need to be notified about where you found her, about what she told you." "Call them," Cole said. "I'll still be here." The doctor nodded slowly. turned to go. Hey, the doctor stopped. The bruise on her jaw, Cole said. She said she didn't fall. The doctor looked back. Something moved through his expression. Not surprise. Something heavier than surprise. We know, he said quietly. We can see that. Cole looked at the floor. Make sure it's documented, he said. All of it. Make sure nobody can say she just fell. The doctor held his gaze for a moment. I will, he said. I promise you that. He disappeared through the door. Logan sat down in the chair next to Cole, the teenager on the other side having relocated to a different part of the room with the self-preservation instinct of someone who had read the room correctly. Logan stretched his long legs out in front of him and looked at the ceiling. Chapter's going to hear about this, Logan said. Yep, you ready for that conversation? Cole leaned back in the plastic chair, looked at the fluorescent lights above him, thought about a child who'd eaten crackers and held a rabbit in a cold alley, and decided that nobody was coming right up until the moment somebody did. Not even a little bit, he said. Logan nodded. Okay then. They sat there together in the waiting room of St. Matthew's Hospital. Two men in leather and patches who made most people step off the sidewalk. And they waited for a little girl named Evie to wake up. Nobody asked them to leave. And for once, in a very long time, Cole Mercer didn't feel like the most dangerous thing in the room. He felt against every odd and every expectation, like maybe he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The plastic chair was not built for a man Cole's size, and after 40 minutes of sitting in it, his lower back had begun to register a formal complaint. He ignored it. He had ignored worse things for longer. The waiting room had thinned out since he arrived. The teenager was gone. The sleeping man with his mouth open had been called back sometime around midnight. A couple sat 3 rows over young early 30s, the woman leaning her head on the man's shoulder, both of them staring at the same point on the floor with the hollow look of people who have been waiting for news that hasn't come yet. Cole recognized that look. He had worn it himself in other waiting rooms for other people. Logan had gotten them both coffee from the machine in the hallway. It was bad coffee, the kind that tastes like the machine was last cleaned during a previous presidential administration. But it was hot, and Cole drank it without complaint because his hands needed something to do. His phone had rung twice more. He had not answered. At 12:40 in the morning, a police officer came through the sliding doors, young, maybe 28, dark jacket with a Colorado Springs badge on the chest. He stood at the entrance for a moment, scanned the room, and his eyes landed on Cole. The way most people's eyes landed on Cole in public spaces, with the quick calculation of someone deciding how much of a problem this might become. Cole raised his hand slightly. Officer. The young cop approached, stopped a few feet short. His name tag read Delgado. His posture was careful, not aggressive, but not relaxed either. The posture of someone who had been trained to treat every unknown as a potential variable. You're the one who brought in the girl, Delgado said. Cole Mercer. Yes. Delgado looked at the patch, looked at Cole. You want to tell me what happened? Completely, Cole said. Sit down. Delgado sat. Cole walked him through it. Every detail in order without editorializing. The ride Logan's called the alley on 5th and Cascade, the cardboard box, Evie's voice in the dark, what she had told him about Vanessa, the drive to the hospital. He spoke plainly the way he had learned to speak to law enforcement over 30 years. Not friendly, not hostile, just precise. Facts had a way of protecting you if you gave them cleanly. Delgado took notes. His pen moved fast. When Cole got to the part about Vanessa driving away, the pen slowed down. She told you the woman drove her there on purpose, Delgado said. Told her to go look for a red door. That's what Evie said. And then the car was gone. That's what Evie said, Cole repeated steadily. Delgado looked up from his notepad. Do you know this child, prior to tonight, never seen her before in my life? And your connection to the area where she was found? Cole met his eyes. I was riding. I stopped because my guy spotted something in the alley. He paused. You're going to ask me about the patch. Delgado held his gaze. Should I? No, a beat passed. Something shifted in Delgado's expression. Not quite respect, but something in that direction. He wrote something else down. We're running the girl's information now, trying to locate the father. He paused. You said the stepmother's name was Vanessa. That's what Evie called her. I don't have a last name. Okay. Delgado closed the notepad, looked at Cole for a moment. Then the doctor said you specifically asked for the bruise to be documented. I did. Why? Cole leaned forward slightly. Because I know what it looks like when someone's been hit and someone else has been told they just fell. I've seen it before. He didn't elaborate on where. I wanted it on record before anyone had a chance to shape a different story. Delgado was quiet for a second. Then he said quietly, not as an officer, just as a person, good call. He stood, extended his hand. Cole shook it, which surprised them both slightly. We'll be in touch, Mr. Mercer. Don't go far tonight. I'm not going anywhere, Cole said, and he meant it. Logan watched Delgado leave, then turned to Cole with an expression that was somewhere between tired and impressed. You actually shook his hand. Don't make it weird. That's the most normal thing you have done in a decade, Logan. Yeah, drink your terrible coffee. Logan drank his terrible coffee. It was nearly 1:30 when the nurse Martinez, the one from earlier, came to find him. She looked less shaken now, more settled into the professionalism that emergency room nurses develop as armor. But there was something in how she looked at Cole that had changed. Something had been recalibrated. She's awake, Martinez said. She's asking for you, and Cole was on his feet before Martinez finished the sentence. She specifically said your name, she asked. She said the big man who smelled like motorcycles. Martinez almost smiled. I assume that was you. Logan stood automatically, but Cole held up one hand. Stay. Logan sat back down without argument. Cole followed Martinez through a set of double doors and down a corridor that smelled like antiseptic, and something beneath it, something human and tired. The hospital at 1:30 in the morning had its own particular weight. Quieter than day, more honest somehow. The way things get when the performance of daylight is worn off. Martinez stopped outside a room. She's been asking questions, she said, lowering her voice. About where she's going, about her dad. We haven't been able to reach him yet. She paused. She seems calm, actually. More calm than most adults in her situation. She's been practicing, Cole said. Martinez looked at him, not understanding. Practicing being calm, he said. When you don't have any other options, you practice being calm. He paused. How long before someone comes to get her? We have a call into Child Protective Services. They'll send someone. It could be a few hours. Cole nodded slowly. Is it okay if I sit with her until someone comes? Martinez studied him for a moment. The patches, the tattoos, the sheer physical scale of him. And then she said something that he would remember for a long time. She said, she's safer with you in the room than without you. Yes, go in. Evie was sitting up in the hospital bed, which was too large for her, in the way that all hospital beds are too large for children, making her look even smaller than she was. She had an intravenous line in her left arm and a warming blanket pulled up to her chin. Her color was better. The blue was gone from her lips, replaced by the pale pink of a child who was cold but returning. The rabbit was on the pillow next to her. Someone had found it in Cole's jacket pocket when they'd taken her in and made sure it got back to her, and Cole made a mental note to find out who that was and acknowledge it. Evie looked up when he came in. Her face did something complicated. Relief and weariness, and something else that Cole recognized as the expression of someone who had hoped for something and was now afraid that the hoping had been a mistake. You stayed, she said. Said I would. She looked at the rabbit. People say things, I know. Cole pulled a chair close to the bed, a real one this time, not a plastic waiting room chair, and sat down. I'm still here. Evie was quiet for a moment. She plucked at the edge of the warming blanket. Is my dad coming? Cole held her gaze. They're trying to reach him right now. He doesn't know where I am. No, but they'll find him. Evie's jaw tightened. For a 7-year-old, she had a remarkable amount of control over her face, which told Cole a great deal about how long she had needed that control. He's going to be so scared, she said. Yeah, Cole said. He probably is. Is he going to think it's my fault? The question hit the room like something thrown. Cole kept his face steady. No, he said. This is not your fault, not one piece of it. Evie looked at him with those careful eyes. Vanessa's going to say it is. Vanessa doesn't have a lot of credibility right now, Evie. She left a 7-year-old in an alley. He paused. That's not something people get to explain their way out of. Evie considered that for a long moment. What if my dad believes her anyway? Cole thought about all the things he knew about men who chose the wrong people and then had to choose between those people and their children. He thought about how often they chose wrong. He thought about the specific cruelty of that particular failure and how it left marks that didn't fade. But he also thought about a father who didn't yet know his daughter had been missing for 36 hours, about what that man was going to feel when he found out, about how that feeling, if it was the right kind, could be more powerful than anything Vanessa had ever told him. I think Cole said carefully that when your dad finds out what really happened, he's going to have to make a choice. And I think that choice is going to tell you everything you need to know. Evie looked at him for a long time. That's a very grown-up answer, she said. You asked a very grown-up question. She thought about that, then very quietly. I'm tired of being grown up. Something broke open in Cole's chest, not the crack from earlier. Something wider, something that had been sealed for a long time, sealed with all the practical necessities of the life he led and the man he'd become, and the years of deciding that certain kinds of feeling were a luxury the road didn't allow. I know, he said. His voice was lower than he intended. I know you are. Evie pulled the rabbit into her lap, held it with both hands. His name is Thomas, she said. Good name. My mom gave him to me before she got really sick. She smoothed one of Thomas's ears flat. She said that when I was scared, I should hold him, and it would be like she was holding my hand. Cole couldn't speak for a moment. Does it work? He finally managed. Evie nodded very small. Yeah, she said, most of the time. They talked for a long time about small things mostly. The way you do when you're both trying not to collapse under the weight of the large things. Evie asked him how motorcycles worked. He told her in simple terms, and she listened with the focused attention of a child who was genuinely curious about how the world operated. She asked him if he had any kids. He said no. She asked him why not. He said it was a long story. She said she had time. He said fair enough and told her the short version, that he had lived a life that hadn't made much room for the things that required roots, and that there were things he regretted about that, even if he'd never said so out loud before. That's sad, Evie said. A little bit, he admitted. You'd be a good dad, she said. The matter-of-fact certainty of a child who had processed something and reached a conclusion. You stayed. Cole looked at his hands. Big hands, scarred, tattooed hands that had done a lot of things, some of which he was proud of, and some of which he was not. He turned them over once slowly and then looked back at Evie. Thank you, he said, and he meant it in a way that went all the way down. It was at that exact moment, 1:53 in the morning, in a room at St. Matthew's Hospital, that the door opened and a man came in. Cole had a particular instinct for reading people the second they entered a room, honed over 30 years of situations where being wrong about a person could cost you everything. He read the man instantly. Mid-40s medium, billed the look of someone who had been asleep an hour ago and had come back to waking in stages, each one worse than the last. He was wearing a sweatshirt inside out. His shoes weren't tied. His face was the face of a man who had been handed information he couldn't fully metabolize yet. He was Evie's father. He stopped inside the doorway. His eyes went straight to Evie the way eyes do when they have been terrified of not seeing something, and then they see it. He made a sound that wasn't quite a word, just sound the compressed release of something enormous. Dad. Evie's voice broke on the single syllable. He crossed the room in 4 steps. Cole stood automatically and stepped back, giving the man all the space in the world, pressing himself against the far wall and becoming as best he could invisible. The man gathered Evie into his arms carefully around the intravenous line around the warming blanket and held her in the way that only a parent who has been very specifically afraid holds a child. Like he needed to verify with his whole body that she was actually there. Evie cried. The held-back practical two-old tears that she had kept contained all evening finally came loose, and she cried into her father's sweatshirt with the full-throated grief of a child who had been waiting without knowing it for exactly this permission. Cole stood against the wall and looked at the ceiling and breathed through his nose. The father's name was David, David Morrison. He pulled back eventually enough to look at his daughter's face to look at the bruise, and Cole watched the moment David Morrison saw the bruise and understood what it meant. He watched the understanding move through the man's face like weather, like a storm front that changes everything it passes over, Evie, David said, his voice very low. Who it was, Vanessa, Dad. Evie said it plainly. She had apparently been waiting to say it. She hit me and she left me in the alley. She told me it was a new school, but there was no school. She just left me there. David Morrison sat back. His hands were still on Evie's arms. His face had gone through several things in quick succession and had arrived at an expression Cole recognized. The expression of a man who was facing the specific terrible knowledge that he had failed to protect someone he loved and that the failure had not been abstract, that it had been a bruise, that it had been an alley, that it had been 36 hours of cold and crackers in a stuffed rabbit and no one coming. Oh God, David said. It came out barely above a whisper. Oh baby, I'm so sorry. You didn't know, Evie said with more generosity than the situation required. I should have known. David's voice cracked on the last word, split clean down the middle. I saw signs, Evie. I saw things and I told myself. He stopped, pressed his eyes shut. When he opened them, they were wet. I'm so sorry. Evie looked at her father for a long moment, the calculating look of a child deciding something important. Then she said, Cole found me. David looked up, seemed for the first time to register that there was another person in the room. His eyes found Cole against the wall, and Cole watched the man take in the full picture. The size, the leather, the patches, all of it. And he watched David Morrison make the same calculation that every person who encountered Cole made and arrived somewhere different from where most of them landed. You found her, David said. My guy spotted her first, Cole said. I just stopped. David looked at him, really looked. The kind of looking that had nothing to do with what was on the surface. Then he stood up from the bed. He crossed the room to where Cole was standing against the wall, and Cole stayed completely still because the situation was uncertain and unpredictable, and David Morrison was operating on hours of terror and grief and guilt, and Cole did not know what direction any of that was going to move. David Morrison put both hands on Cole's shoulders. Cole was taller by several inches, broader by a significant margin, and David Morrison stood there and looked up at him, and his face was completely open in the way that faces get when a person has run out of the energy required to keep them closed. Thank you, David said. The words were raw, unfinished sounding, like they were trying to carry weight that words weren't built for. Thank you. Cole put one hand briefly on the man's shoulder. Take care of her, he said. That's all. David nodded, pressed his mouth together, nodded again. Then he turned back to his daughter and sat on the edge of the bed, and Evie leaned against him, and the two of them stayed like that. The father in the inside-out sweatshirt and the daughter in the too large hospital bed pressed together in the specific gravity of people who have nearly lost each other and have decided without needing to say it, never to take that for granted again. Cole picked up his jacket from the chair. He moved quietly toward the door. Cole. Evie's voice stopped him. He turned. She was looking at him from her father's side, Thomas the rabbit in her lap, intravenous line in her arm, warming blanket still pulled to her chin. She looked like what she was, A child who had been through something terrible and had come out the other side of it into something that might eventually be okay. Will you come back? She asked. Cole looked at her, at the rabbit, at the bruise that was going to fade and the story that was not going to, and the father holding her like he intended to keep doing exactly that. Yeah, he said, I'll come back. He meant that too. He pushed through the door, walked back down the corridor, came out through the double doors into the waiting room where Logan was asleep in a plastic chair with his arms folded and his chin on his chest. Cole stood there for a second and looked at his phone. 11 missed calls now. 7 from numbers he didn't recognize, which meant the story was already moving, already traveling the way things traveled in the life. Best transformed, growing in the telling. He woke Logan with a hand on his shoulder. Logan startled upright, hand moving to his side automatically before his eyes caught up with where he was. Then he settled, looked at Cole. She okay? Her dad's with her. Logan exhaled, rubbed his face. What's the play? Cole looked at the hospital doors, at the night beyond them, at the city sitting quiet and dark and full of alleys where things happened that no one saw. We go home, he said, and tomorrow we figure out what comes next. Logan stood, rolled his neck, reached for his jacket. You know this isn't over, he said. Not a question. No, Cole agreed, it's not. Because it wasn't. He could feel it, the particular unfinished quality of a thing that has been set in motion and cannot be stopped. Something had started in that alley on 5th and Cascade, something that Cole Mercer had not planned for and could not have predicted and would not be able to walk away from simply by riding home. What he didn't know yet, what none of them knew yet, was that Vanessa had not simply disappeared, that she had in fact made a phone call that night, that the phone call had reached people, that those people had questions, and that some of those questions were about Cole Mercer. The night was not over. It was, in fact, only just beginning. Cole slept 3 hours, maybe less. He had never been a good sleeper. The road did that to you after enough years, kept some part of your brain running at a low idle, even when the rest of you was trying to shut down. He woke up at 5:47 in the morning to his phone vibrating across the nightstand and lay there for exactly 2 seconds deciding whether to answer it before he picked it up. Unknown number. Colorado Springs area code, he answered. Mr. Mercer, a woman's voice. Controlled professional, the kind of voice that was used to delivering information that other people found difficult. My name is Detective Karen Voss, Colorado Springs Police Department. I apologize for the early hour. I need you to come in this morning. We have some questions about last night. Cole sat up, about Evie. Among other things, Voss said, can you be here by 8? I can be there by 7. A pause. 7 works, she said. If she was surprised, she didn't show it. Ask for me at the front desk. Cole hung up, sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a moment. Among other things, those 3 words were doing a lot of work. He called Logan. Logan answered on the second ring, which meant he hadn't been sleeping either. I heard, Logan said before Cole could speak. Heard what Voss called Paulson 30 minutes ago. Paulson was the chapter's lawyer. Had been for 9 years. The man operated at a specific frequency between entirely legitimate and strategically ambiguous, which was exactly what the chapter required. What did she want with Paulson? She asked if anyone in the chapter had a prior relationship with a woman named Vanessa Sterling. Cole went still. That's her last name. Apparently so. Logan's voice had taken on the carefully neutral tone he used when the information was bad enough that inflection would only make it worse. Merc Vanessa Sterling filed a report at 2:15 this morning. She told the police that she witnessed a Hells Angels member abduct a child from her vehicle. The silence that followed was very loud. She said what Cole said. It came out flat, not a question. The specific flatness of a man who has heard something so far outside of reality that his voice simply refuses to perform the appropriate emotional response. She filed the report herself, Logan said. Went to the station, said she was driving home and saw a large man in a motorcycle jacket take a child off the street. Said she tried to intervene, but he rode off before she could get a plate. She abandoned that girl in an alley. I know that. Evie told me herself. Evie told the doctor. Evie told the police officer last night. Delgado's report is in the system, Logan said. But Voss is working a different angle, and Vanessa got to her first. He paused. Paulson says don't say anything until he's in the room. Cole stood up, started moving. Tell Paulson to be there at 7. He said 8 was the earliest he could. Tell him 7, Cole said. Tell him I said the word retainer loud enough that his whole office heard it. A brief pause. He'll be there at 7. Cole hung up and stood in the middle of his room in the dark, in the particular silence of a situation that has just become significantly more complicated than it was 8 hours ago. Vanessa Sterling had not disappeared. Vanessa Sterling had done something much smarter than disappearing. She had gone on offense. He thought about Evie in that hospital bed, about the bruise on her jaw, about her voice saying, I thought you were just a bad guy, but you stopped. About 36 hours of cold and crackers and a stuffed rabbit that smelled like her dead mother's hands. He put on his jacket, picked up his keys. Whatever Vanessa Sterling had started, Cole Mercer was going to finish it. The police station at 7 in the morning had a specific energy: shift change, coffee, the quiet management of accumulated overnight chaos. Cole walked in with Paulson at his shoulder, and the desk officer's eyes did the familiar thing, the quick calculation, the almost imperceptible straightening that people did when a large man in a Hell's Angels cut walked through their door. Cole gave his name, asked for Voss, sat down. Paulson, small, 53, silver-haired, with the look of a man who had walked into difficult rooms so many times that difficulty had simply stopped registering, leaned over and said quietly, let me hear the question before you answer anything. Every time. I know the drill, Cole said. I know you know the drill. I'm saying it anyway because you're angry, and angry people get impatient, and impatient people answer questions that haven't been asked yet. Cole looked at him. Paulson looked back with the calm of a man who was being paid enough not to blink. Fine, Cole said. Detective Karen Voss was 40, compact, with the kind of posture that suggested she had made a conscious decision at some point in her career to take up exactly as much space as she needed and not 1 inch more. She shook Cole's hand without hesitation. He noticed that. She led them to an interview room that smelled like old coffee and the particular institutional neutrality of a space designed to make people feel like they were being evaluated at all times. She sat across from them, put a folder on the table, didn't open it yet. Mr. Mercer, she said, thank you for coming in so quickly. I want to be helpful, Cole said. Paulson's hand moved slightly under the table, a small gesture of approval that Cole caught without looking. I'm sure you do. Voss looked at him evenly. I want to be straightforward with you. We have 2 conflicting accounts of what happened last night. Evelyn Morrison's account as given to Officer Delgado and corroborated by the treating physician is one account. We have a second account filed at 2:15 this morning by a woman named Vanessa Sterling, who describes herself as Evelyn's stepmother. She's the father's girlfriend, Cole said. She's not a stepmother, Voss noted that. She describes herself as Evelyn's primary caregiver and states that she witnessed a man matching your description take Evelyn from her vehicle while she was stopped at a light on Cascade Avenue. Paulson said, Detective, my client has already given a full statement to Officer Delgado, including the location where Evelyn was found and the duration of her exposure. That statement is on record. I've read Delgado's report, Voss said. I've also spoken with the attending physician. I've seen the medical documentation, including the documentation of Evelyn's injuries. She paused. I'm not here to challenge your client's account, Mr. Paulson. I'm here because what we have is more complicated than it looks. She opened the folder, turned it around, pushed it across the table. Cole looked down. It was a photograph, a security camera still, grainy, time-stamped at 9:47 in the evening, about 20 minutes before Cole had been in that alley. The image showed a car, dark-colored mid-size, parked at the entrance of the alley on 5th and Cascade. The driver's side door was open, and on the pavement, barely visible at the edge of the frame, was a small figure. Cole looked at it. "That's Vanessa's car," he said. "We believe so," Voss said. "We pulled the footage this morning. The timestamp puts her vehicle at that location 38 minutes before you arrived." She paused. The image shows a child being helped out of the vehicle. Not pulled, not dragged, walked out with Vanessa's hand on her shoulder. Cole's jaw tightened. She walked her into the alley and left her. "That's one reading," Voss said. "Vanessa's reading is different." "I know what Vanessa's reading is," Cole said. Paulson's hand moved again. Slower this time. The gesture of a man pumping the brakes. Cole stopped. Voss looked at him steadily. "Vanessa's reading," she continued, "is that she was dropping Evelyn off at a tutoring session. That she drove away believing Evelyn had gone inside safely. That she had no knowledge Evelyn was in the alley." She paused. "She has a receipt. A tutoring center on 5th Street. She claims that Evelyn misread the address." The room went very quiet. Cole stared at the folder, at the photograph, at the timestamp. He thought about everything Evie had told him, the precise, jagged childhood clarity of it, the red door, the school that wasn't there, the car that was gone before she turned around. "Evelyn is 7 years old," Cole said carefully. "She told me specifically that Vanessa said the school had a special entrance, a red door. She went into the alley looking for it." He paused. "There is no tutoring center with a red door, detective. You know that." "We're checking," Voss said. "The bruise on her jaw," Cole said. "Vanessa says Evelyn fell in the alley, that she must have tripped in the dark. The doctor documented it as consistent with impact, not a fall." "Doctors document what they observe," Voss said. "Interpretation is a different matter." Her tone was careful, precise, the tone of someone laying out the landscape of a problem rather than arguing a position. "Mr. Mercer, I am not telling you I believe Vanessa Sterling's account. I am telling you that she has constructed one, and it has enough surface plausibility that I cannot simply dismiss it, which means this becomes a case." She looked at him. "And you become a witness." "I found that little girl," Cole said, "in an alley, half frozen, after 36 hours. I know. She told me what happened. She told a lot of people what happened." Voss closed the folder. "Evelyn's account is consistent across every telling. That matters. What also matters is that Vanessa Sterling has a lawyer already. And that lawyer filed an emergency motion at 6 this morning to have Evelyn placed in Vanessa's custody pending investigation." The air in the room changed. Cole felt something move through him that was colder than the night had been. "She filed for custody," he said. "She's claiming to be the child's primary caregiver. She's claiming the father is unfit, citing a prior offense from 3 years ago. And she's positioning herself as a responsible party who was trying to help Evelyn and whose good intentions were disrupted by." Voss paused, choosing her words with surgical precision, "an unknown individual with a criminal history who took Evelyn before Vanessa could ensure her safety." Cole's hands were flat on the table. He was aware of them being flat because he was making a deliberate choice to keep them that way. "My client Paulson said with the cool of a man who had practiced this particular cool for 3 decades, has no charges that resulted in conviction relevant to child welfare detective. Whatever you've been told about his history." "I know his history," Voss said. She looked at Cole, not Paulson. "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Mercer. I ran you thoroughly before this meeting." She paused. "I also know that you stayed at that hospital from 11 in the evening until approximately 3 in the morning, waiting for a child you had found in an alley to be declared stable. I know that you asked the medical staff to specifically document the child's injuries. I know that you cooperated fully with Officer Delgado when most people in your position, with your particular complicated relationship with law enforcement, would have dropped the child off and left." She folded her hands on the table. "I'm trying to figure out who you are in this story, Mr. Mercer, because right now you're either the most important witness I have or you're about to become the story itself, and I'd rather you be the witness. Cole looked at her. She was smart. He had known that within 90 seconds of sitting down, and he respected it even as it complicated everything. What do you need from me, he asked. Merc Paulson said. What do you need, Cole repeated. Voss looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I need you to be very, very careful. Because Vanessa Sterling is not stupid. She knows that a Hells Angels president finding a missing child is a story that looks good unless it stops looking good. And the easiest way to make it stop looking good is to make you the problem. She paused. She's going to try to make you the problem. I know, Cole said. Do you have anyone who can speak to your character? Anyone outside your organization? Community members, local figures, people whose word carries weight in a courtroom or a custody hearing? Cole thought about it. A few, he said. I'd start making calls. Voss said, the custody motion is being heard tomorrow morning. Cole went very still. Tomorrow. Vanessa's lawyer filed for emergency consideration. The judge granted it. She looked at him steadily. David Morrison needs a lawyer who can respond to this today. Not tomorrow. Today. And Evelyn's voice needs to be in that courtroom, which means someone needs to argue for a guardian ad litem before this afternoon. She paused. I'm telling you things I'm not strictly required to tell you because Evelyn Morrison is a 7-year-old child who has already had too many adults make the wrong call, and I am not going to be one of them. She stood. I think we're done here. Cole stood, extended his hand. Voss shook it. Her grip was firm and did not hesitate. Mr. Mercer, she said as he turned toward the door. He looked back. Whatever you did or didn't do in your life before last night you did the right thing. I want that on the record. Even if it never goes anywhere official. She held his gaze. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Cole looked at her for a moment. Then he said, thank you, detective. And he walked out. Paulson was on his phone before they hit the hallway. Cole stood outside the interview room and called Logan. The call connected on the first ring. We have a problem, Cole said. Bigger than the one we had 20 minutes ago. Vanessa filed for emergency custody of Evie. Hearings tomorrow morning. He heard Logan go silent in a way that meant he was processing. I need David Morrison to have a lawyer in the next 3 hours. A good one. Family law, not criminal. I know someone, Logan said. Diane Marsh. She's out of Denver, but she takes cases like this. She owes me a favor. Long story, call it in. Already pulling up her number. A pause. Merc, what does Vanessa think she's doing? She can't actually win this. Cole pushed through the door into the cold morning air. She doesn't need to win, he said. She needs to slow it down. She needs to muddy the water. She needs Evie in her custody long enough to get to her before this case solidifies. He stopped walking. And she needs me to look like the villain in this story instead of her. Logan was quiet for a second. She knows about you, specifically. She's been doing homework, Cole said. She found my name somewhere, and she built a story around it. Hells Angels president takes child. It's a headline that writes itself if you leave out everything that actually happened. Then we can't let her leave it out, Logan said. No, Cole looked at the sky, gray and flat and cold, the kind of sky that promised nothing comfortable. Get me David Morrison's number and find out if Evie has spoken to anyone from Protective Services yet. On it. Cole hung up, stood on the sidewalk outside the police station. He thought about Vanessa Sterling sitting across a desk at 2:15 in the morning, calmly constructing a story while Evie was in a hospital bed being warmed back to life. He thought about the specific kind of cold it took to do that. Not the cold of the alley. That was just weather. This was something else. The cold of a person who had calculated and decided and was still calculating. He thought about what Voss had said. She's going to try to make you the problem. He thought about Evie's voice. I thought you were just a bad guy, but you stopped. He put his phone in his pocket and stood very still on the sidewalk for exactly 15 seconds. The amount of time he allowed himself in the worst situations to feel the full weight of something before he picked it up and started moving with it. 15 seconds. Then he started moving. David Morrison answered on the third ring. His voice was raw. The voice of a man who had slept minimally and wept more than he usually would have admitted to, and was now running on the thin-wired energy of a parent who had been afraid and was still afraid, just about different things now. Cole told him about Vanessa's custody motion quickly and without softening it, because David needed information more than he needed comfort right now, and softening it would only cost him time he didn't have. The silence on the other end lasted 4 seconds. Then David said, "She's trying to take Evie. She's trying to get in front of the story," Cole said. "She knows that if Evie testifies, if this goes to any kind of hearing or proceeding with Evie's account on record, Vanessa's finished. So she's trying to create a version of events where she's the responsible adult, and I'm the threat, and you're the unfit father. And she's trying to establish that version before the real one has time to solidify." "She can't do this," David said. The words were tight, stretched thin over something that was either fury or panic or both. "She left my daughter in an alley." "I know. Evie told me what she did. The doctor documented the bruise." "I know all of that, David, and it matters. But it only matters if it gets heard. You need a lawyer today. Someone who can respond to this motion before 5 this evening. I have a name." A pause. I don't have the kind of money that—" "Don't worry about the money right now," Cole said. And he said it with the particular steadiness of someone who has already made a decision about something and is not inviting discussion. "Her name is Diane Marsh. She's out of Denver. She's going to call you in the next 30 minutes. When she does, tell her everything. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out. Why are you doing this?" David's voice had gone quiet, not suspicious, something closer to confused. The confusion of a man who has been told in 100 ways over a long life what kind of people exist and what they want from you, and who is currently watching that framework fail to explain what's in front of him. "You don't know us." Cole thought about an alley on 5th and Cascade, about a small voice asking if he was going to take her back to her, about a stuffed rabbit named Thomas, and a mother who had taught her daughter not to judge people by how they looked. "I know, Evie," Cole said. "That's enough." David made a sound on the other end that he might have tried to cover, might not have bothered to. "Then thank you, Mr. Mercer." "Cole," he said. "Just Cole." He hung up and turned around. Logan was standing 10 feet behind him, phone in his hand jacket zipped against the cold. He had the expression of a man who had heard enough of one side of a conversation to understand the whole of it. "Diane's calling Morrison in 20 minutes, Logan said. "She's already looked at the motion filing. She says Vanessa's lawyer made a procedural error. She says the emergency consideration request cites a statute that requires 48 hours notice when the opposing party has legal counsel of record. David didn't have counsel of record yet, so it technically went through. But if David gets counsel today, she can file a response and push the hearing. How long does that buy us?" "A week, maybe 10 days, Logan paused. "And Diane says if Evie's account is as consistent as you say it is, and if the medical documentation holds, Vanessa's case is a sandcastle." Cole exhaled. "A week gives Evie time to tell her story in a setting where it's protected." "It gives you time too," Logan said, "to not be the story." Cole looked at him. "Am I the story?" Logan was quiet for a moment. "You might be," he said honestly. "There's a reporter been outside the hospital since 6 this morning. Someone talked, hospital staff maybe, or someone who was in the waiting room last night. Story's already out there in pieces. Hell's Angels leader brings child to hospital. Some versions are good, some aren't." He paused. "Vanessa's lawyer already gave a quote. What did it say?" Logan pulled out his phone, read it aloud without inflection, the way Logan always delivered bad news. Clean, direct, without additional weight. Quote, "Our client is deeply concerned about the welfare of her stepdaughter and is cooperating fully with authorities. She is disturbed by reports that an individual with a known criminal history was involved in the child's care and intends to ensure that the child is returned to a safe environment as quickly as possible. End quote. Cole stood with that for a moment, felt the architecture of it, the way it was built to sound reasonable while carrying its real payload in the words known criminal history, the way it would land for anyone who didn't know the full story, the way it would look next to a headline that said Hell's Angels president and child in the same sentence. Smart, he said. He didn't mean it as a compliment. What do we do? Logan asked. Cole looked at the station behind him, at the city around him, at the gray sky above it, all flat and cold and making no promises. He thought about Detective Voss and what she had said in that interview room. He thought about Paulson's careful hands on the table. He thought about Evie asking, "Will you come back?" "We don't go quiet," Cole said, "and we don't go loud either. We let the truth do what truth does when you get out of its way." He started walking toward the bike, and we make sure every person who needs to hear Evie's actual story hears it before Vanessa's version has time to set. Logan fell into step beside him. "You know this is going to be the hardest week of your life, and you haven't slept in 22 hours. "Probably," Cole said, "and you're doing it anyway." "She's 7 years old, Logan." Cole stopped at the bike, looked at it for a second. She had crackers and a rabbit, and she decided to just survive the night because nobody was coming. He put on his helmet. Somebody came. That's the end of that part of the story. Now we make sure the rest of it doesn't undo what that part started. Logan put on his own helmet, swung onto his bike. "You know what the guys are going to say when they hear about all this?" "I know exactly what they're going to say. Half of them are going to think I've lost my mind. Half of them are going to be right," Logan said. Cole started the engine, felt the familiar vibration move up through his hands and his arms and settle somewhere in his chest where it had lived for 30 years. "And the other half are going to show up when I call. So let's call them." He pulled out of the parking lot. Logan rode behind him. The city moved past them, waking up, ordinary, full of people who had slept through the night without knowing what had happened in a cold alley on 5th and Cascade, without knowing that a little girl had survived on crackers and faith, and that a man no one expected had stopped, and that the stopping had set in motion something that was going to take a lot more from him than just one night. He rode toward it anyway, because that was it turned out what you did when it mattered. You rode toward it anyway. Diane Marsh called Cole at 9:17 that morning, which was 11 minutes after she finished her first call with David Morrison, which meant she had been working the case for less than 20 minutes before she picked up the phone to talk to the man who had started all of it. Cole took that as a good sign. Lawyers who move fast either cared or smelled something worth fighting. Diane Marsh, it turned out, was the kind who did both. "You're Cole Mercer," she said. "Not a question." "I am." "Logan Hayes speaks very highly of you." "Logan Hayes doesn't speak highly of anyone, so I took note." Her voice was sharp and quick, the voice of a woman who had learned to compress a lot of thinking into a small number of words. "I've read the motion Vanessa Sterling's attorney filed. I've read Delgado's report. I've read the preliminary medical documentation from St. Matthew's." She paused one beat. "I need you to understand something before we go any further. The procedural error in Vanessa's filing buys David time. It does not win this. What wins this is Evie." "I know that," Cole said. "Evie needs to give a recorded statement to a guardian ad litem before Vanessa's team gets anywhere near her. Right now, Evie is still in the hospital, which means she's in a protected environment. The moment she's discharged, the legal geography changes." Another pause. "When is she being discharged?" Cole hadn't thought to ask. He called Martinez at the hospital while Diane held. Martinez told him Evie was being evaluated that morning and could potentially be released by afternoon pending parental authorization and a welfare check from Protective Services. Cole relayed that to Diane. "This afternoon," Diane said. The words came out flat and fast like a timer being set. "Okay, I'm filing 2 motions in the next 90 minutes. First, a response to Vanessa's emergency petition citing the procedural defect that pushes the hearing. Second, a motion for immediate appointment of a guardian ad litem for Evie, which takes the question of Evie's placement temporarily out of Vanessa's hands and puts it in front of a neutral party. She stopped. The second motion is the important one. If I get it, Evie's voice becomes the loudest thing in the room. If I don't get it, this becomes a fight between two adults with competing stories and a little girl stuck in the middle. What do you need from me, Cole asked. It was the same question he had asked Voss that morning, and he meant it the same way. Completely without reservation. With the specific willingness of a man who has decided the outcome matters more than the cost. I need a written account of everything you observed from the moment you entered that alley to the moment you left the hospital. Timestamp detailed, no editorializing. Every word Evie said to you as close to verbatim as you can manage. She paused. Can you do that? I remember everything she said. I believe you, she said. It came without softness, which somehow made it more credible. I also need you to understand that Vanessa's lawyer is going to use you. Your history, your affiliation. They're going to put your patch on trial and hope the judge can't see past it. I know. Does that concern you? Cole thought about it honestly, which was the only way he knew how to think about things that mattered. It concerns me for Evie, he said. Not for me. There was a brief silence on Diane's end. Then she said, good answer. And she hung up. Logan had the chapter assembled by 10:30. Not all of them. 6 men, the ones Cole trusted most completely. The ones who had been in the hard rooms and had not flinched at the hard moments. They sat around the table at the clubhouse with coffee and without ceremony because Cole hadn't called them there for ceremony. He told them everything. The alley, Evie, the hospital, Vanessa's filing, Voss, Diane, all of it in order without performance. When he finished, the room was quiet for about 4 seconds, which was a long time for 6 bikers sitting around a table. Then a man named Garrett 44, former Army, the kind of quiet that was actually compressed. Volume said, what do you need? I need to know if anyone has a direct connection to anyone in the county family court system, Cole said. Not corrupt. I'm not looking to buy anything. I'm looking for someone who knows how that courtroom operates and can tell me what we're actually walking into. A man named Ray said he knew a clerk. Not the judge, but someone who had worked in that system for 14 years and would know the lay of it. Cole told him to make the call, carefully, in a way that didn't create any impression of pressure or interference. Ray nodded and stepped out. Cole looked at the rest of them. The other thing I need is simpler and harder, he said. I need you to let this be handled by the right people in the right way. No visibility, no presence outside that courtroom that gives anyone a reason to look at us sideways. He paused. Vanessa's lawyer is already building a picture of gang involvement in a child custody case. Every bike parked outside that building is a brushstroke in that picture. A man named Torres, who had been with Cole for 15 years and had a daughter of his own, said, so we disappear. You disappear, Cole said, except for the ones I specifically asked for. Torres looked at his coffee, then looked up. She's okay? The girl? She's going to be, Cole said, and he said it with a certainty he was still in the process of earning because some statements needed to be made before they were fully true in order to help make them true. Torres nodded. The room settled. The meeting was essentially over, which was how the best meetings ended. Quickly, with clarity, with everyone knowing what they were and weren't supposed to do. Garrett stayed behind when the others left. He and Cole had known each other for 22 years, which was long enough that they sometimes communicated in something shorter than sentences. You holding up, Garrett said. I'm fine. That's not what I asked. Cole looked at him. Garrett had the face of a man who had watched Cole carry things for a long time and had learned to read the specific way Cole's jaw set when the weight was more than usual. I don't know what I am right now, Cole admitted. I know what needs to happen. I'm focused on that. There's a reporter outside, Garrett said. Been there since we arrived. Channel 7. Cole had already known. He had clocked the news van on the way in. What's the angle? Local hero angle from what I can tell, Garrett said. Biker saves child. Human interest. They want a statement. Cole thought about what Diane had said. Don't let anyone take that away from you. He thought about what Voss had said. The same thing in different words. He thought about Vanessa's lawyer's quote in the morning news and the words known criminal history sitting in print. Set it up, Cole said. Garrett looked at him. You sure? If I don't define this story, Vanessa defines it, Cole said. And Vanessa's already had a head start. He stood outside the clubhouse at 11:15 in his cut in the cold, and he looked directly into a camera for the first time in his life without being in a courtroom or a police station. The reporter was young, mid-20s, eager in the specific way that hadn't yet been worn down into the careful neutrality of someone who had covered enough stories to stop being surprised by them. Her name was Kelsey. She had good instincts. She let Cole speak before she asked anything. He said, I found a 7-year-old girl alone in an alley at 10:15 Thursday night. She was cold. She was hurt. And she had been there for approximately 36 hours. I took her to St. Matthew's Hospital. The medical staff treated her and she is recovering. He paused. I am not a hero. I'm a person who happened to be in the right place. Any person who had seen what I saw would have done the same thing. He looked at the camera. What I would ask, the only thing I would ask is that the people making decisions about this little girl's future make them based on the facts of what happened and not on the story someone is trying to tell about who I am. Because the facts are very simple. She was in an alley alone. She was left there by someone who was supposed to love her. And I brought her somewhere safe. He stopped. That's the whole story. Kelsey started to ask a follow-up question. Cole said politely and firmly, that's all I have, and walked back inside. Garrett was waiting by the door. How'd that feel? Terrible, Cole said. Let's hope it worked. His phone rang. Paulson, he answered. Diane got the Guardian ad litem, Paulson said, and Cole stopped walking. Judge Harmon granted it 40 minutes ago. A woman named Patricia Lowe is being appointed. She has 20 years in family court and a reputation for being completely impossible to influence in any direction by any party. She's going to want to speak with Evie today before discharge. Cole exhaled, long, slow, and the custody hearing. Pushed to next Thursday, Vanessa's attorney filed an objection to the procedural challenge. Diane expected that, but Harmon ruled in her favor. Vanessa doesn't get Evie today. A pause. That doesn't mean Vanessa stops moving. I know, Cole said. What does she do next? Her attorney is going to go after your credibility as a witness. They'll pull everything. Every arrest, every incident, every documented association. They'll try to establish that Evie's account was influenced by you, that a frightened child in an alley attached to the first adult who showed her kindness and told that adult what she thought he wanted to hear. The particular coldness of it, the clinical dismantling of a child's testimony, moved through Cole like something physical. They're going to say Evie's lying. They're going to say Evie's mistaken, Paulson corrected. It's more effective. Liars can be confronted. Mistaken children are sympathetic to a jury and require a counter-narrative. He paused. Patricia Lowe is the counter-narrative. If she speaks with Evie and Evie's account holds, and Diane tells me Evie is remarkably consistent, then Vanessa's theory collapses. Evie's account will hold, Cole said, with a certainty that was absolute and had nothing to do with legal strategy and everything to do with the specific clarity of a 7-year-old who had told him her story in a cold alley without anyone coaching her, without anyone telling her what to say in the thin, honest voice of a child who had simply decided that this particular adult, in this particular moment, was someone she could tell the truth to. I hope you're right, Paulson said. I am, Cole said. He hung up and stood still for a moment in the middle of the room. Then his phone lit up again. This time it was a number he recognized. St. Matthew's Hospital. Mr. Mercer. It was Martinez. Evie's asking for you. She wants to speak with you before the woman from the court arrives. A brief pause. She says she needs to tell you something. She said it was important. Cole was already moving toward the door before Martinez finished. Tell her I'm on my way. He made it to the hospital in 9 minutes. Martinez met him at the desk and walked him back without ceremony, which told him something about how the staff's perception of him had shifted between 11 in the evening last night and 11:45 this morning. People change their minds about you when they have enough evidence. That was true in every direction. Evie was sitting up straighter now. The color in her face was better, genuinely better. Not just medically better, but the kind of better that meant some reservoir of warmth and energy was refilling itself. Her father was in the chair beside the bed. David Morrison looked at Cole when he came in with an expression that said he had not slept and was not going to apologize for anything about the state of himself because he was past the point of managing impressions. "Hey," Cole said to Evie. "Hey," she said back. She had her hands folded in her lap with a deliberateness that suggested she had been rehearsing this at least slightly. Thomas the rabbit was on the pillow, but she wasn't holding him, which was his own kind of signal. "Martinez said a lady is coming to talk to me today," Evie said. "Patricia Lowe," Cole said. "She's a guardian ad litem. It means she's there specifically for you. Not for your dad, not for Vanessa, just for you. She's going to ask you questions, and then she's going to tell the judge what you told her." Evie absorbed that. "Is she nice? I'm told she's very fair," Cole said, which was the truest thing he could say. Evie nodded slowly. Then she looked at him with those two old eyes that had been seeing everything since before they should have had to. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Before she comes, okay," Cole said. He sat down. Evie looked at her hands, then at her father, who gave her a small nod. The nod of a man who had spent the last several hours learning how to follow his daughter's lead. Then she looked back at Cole. "Vanessa took something," Evie said, "from my room before she took me to the alley." She paused. The pause had the particular weight of a child who has been deciding whether to say something for a long time and has finally decided. "She took my mom's journal." The room went very quiet. "My mom kept a journal," Evie continued, her voice steady in the way that people's voices get when they are determined to finish something. "She wrote in it every day. She wrote about me, about Dad, about things that happened." She stopped. "She also wrote about Vanessa." Cole felt the air in the room change, felt David go very still beside him. "What did your mom write about Vanessa?" Cole asked. "I don't know everything," Evie said. "I couldn't read all of it. Mom's handwriting was hard sometimes. But I read some before Vanessa took it." She looked at her hands again. "Mom wrote that she was worried that Vanessa had been calling Dad a lot even before Mom got really sick. That she had found messages on Dad's phone and asked him about them, and he said it was nothing." Her voice dropped to almost nothing on the last word. "And she wrote that if anything happened to her, she was worried about what Vanessa would do." David Morrison made a sound beside her, sharp and involuntary, the sound of something being understood too late. His face had gone the color of old paper. Evie, Cole said very carefully, "This journal, do you know where Vanessa would have put it?" "Her car," Evie said. "She has a bag she keeps in the back seat. She keeps important things in it. She took the journal out of my nightstand the morning before she took me to the alley. I saw her put it in the bag." Cole looked at David. David was looking at his daughter with the expression of a man who has just understood the full architecture of something he had been too close to see, the shape of it, the scope of it, the terrible patience of it. David, Cole said quietly. David's eyes came to him. They were red at the edges, not from crying, from the particular strain of a person whose understanding of their own life has just been forcibly and completely restructured. "Vanessa took the journal because your wife wrote things in it," Cole said. "Things Vanessa didn't want to become evidence." David pressed his mouth shut. His hands were gripping the armrests of the hospital chair with white-knuckle force. "How long," he said, not to Cole, not to Evie, just to the air in front of him. "How long was this happening, Dad?" Evie's voice was very small. He looked at her. I'm sorry I didn't tell you before. No. David leaned forward, took his daughter's hands in both of his. No, baby. Don't you be sorry. Don't you dare be sorry for any of this. Evie looked at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and put her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her, and the two of them stayed like that. Cole stood up slowly, quietly, walked to the door and stepped into the hallway. He stood there for 30 seconds. Let the weight of what he had just heard settle into its full dimensions. Then he called Diane Marsh. She answered in one ring. Tell me. There's a journal, Cole said. Evie's mother kept it. Vanessa took it from Evie's room the morning before she abandoned Evie in the alley. Evie thinks it contains documentation of a prior relationship between Vanessa and David, and Evie's mother's concerns about Vanessa's intentions. He paused. The journal is likely in Vanessa's car, in a bag in the back seat. Diane was silent for exactly 2 seconds. If that journal exists and says what Evie thinks it says, it's not just evidence in a custody case, she said. It's evidence of premeditation. I know. I need to call Voss, Diane said. Right now, if Vanessa's vehicle hasn't been examined yet, there may be grounds for a search. Vanessa filed that report at 2:15 this morning, Cole said. Her car would have been with her then. It may still be at her residence. I'm calling Voss, Diane said. Diane. It was the first time she had used his first name. If this journal says what Evie thinks it says, Vanessa Sterling didn't just abandon a child. She planned this. She planned it far enough ahead to remove the evidence first. I know, Cole said. That changes everything. I know that too. He hung up, stood in the hospital corridor. Through the door behind him, he could hear Evie's quiet voice and David's lower one. The two of them talking in the specific register of people rebuilding something from the foundation up, which was the hardest and most necessary kind of rebuilding there was. His phone rang again. This time it was Logan, he answered. Channel 7 ran the clip, Logan said. 12 minutes ago. It's already been shared. A pause. Merc people are responding to this. Not like I expected. Another pause. Shorter. A woman called the station. A neighbor of Vanessa's. She says she saw Vanessa's car in the alley at 9:40 in the evening Thursday night. She says she almost called the police but talked herself out of it. His voice was careful. She's willing to make a statement. Cole closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Get her Voss's number. Already did, Logan said. Also, the security footage, the timestamp. Voss's team pulled more of it. There's a second camera 2 blocks over. It caught Vanessa's car leaving the alley, driving past the camera without stopping, without looking back. The image of it landed in Cole's chest like a stone dropping into still water. A car driving past the camera, not stopping, not looking back. A woman in that car who had just left a 7-year-old child in an alley in 42-degree weather and was now driving home and beginning to construct her story. She planned every part of it, Cole said. Right down to you, Logan said. Think about it. She leaves Evie in an alley in a neighborhood where there's foot traffic, where somebody's going to find her. Because if Evie just disappears, there's a search. There's an investigation. And Vanessa's the last person who saw her. But if Evie gets found and found fast, and the story becomes about whoever found her, Cole understood it all at once, the full shape of it, the specific cold intelligence of what Vanessa had constructed. She was counting on someone finding Evie, he said, and she was counting on whoever found Evie being someone she could use. And then you showed up, Logan said, in your cut, with your patches. Cole stood very still. She didn't know it was going to be me specifically. No, Logan agreed. But it didn't matter who it was. Anybody who found a child in that neighborhood at that hour and didn't go straight to the police, a homeless person, someone who didn't want the attention, a kid. He stopped. You were actually the best thing that could have happened to Evie. Because you stayed. Because you had Paulson. Because you had enough hard experience to document everything and call it in a way that couldn't be used against Evie later. A pause. But Vanessa thought she could spin whatever she got. and she tried. Cole thought about the alley, about Evie's face behind the cardboard box, about the 7-year-old who had survived on crackers and faith and a rabbit named Thomas, and the slim hope that the world was maybe not entirely what it had recently seemed. He thought about what it meant that Evie had survived Vanessa's plan, that the plan had depended on Evie being found and had still tried to consume whoever found her, that the whole machinery of it had turned on a 7-year-old girl who had somehow, through pure, stubborn endurance, remained exactly herself throughout all of it. Logan Cole said, "Yeah, call Garrett. I need someone outside this hospital, not visible, just present, until further notice." A pause. "You think Vanessa would actually?" "I think Vanessa planned this far ahead," Cole said. "And I'm not taking chances. Evie doesn't leave this building without eyes on the situation." "Done," Logan said, and hung up. Cole turned back toward Evie's room. Through the door, he could hear Evie's voice, clearer now, steadier, telling her father something. The words indistinct through the door, but the tone unmistakable. It was the tone of a child who has been waiting a very long time to be believed and has finally in the last 24 hours discovered that some people in the world will stop their motorcycles and sit on wet alley floors and stay in plastic hospital chairs until 3 in the morning specifically because she matters, because her story matters, because the truth of what happened to her matters. He pushed the door open. David and Evie both looked up. Evie read his face the way children rate adults when they've learned to do it out of necessity. Quickly, precisely, looking for the thing behind the expression. "Something happened," she said. "A few things Cole said." He sat back down. "All of them in your direction." He looked at her steadily. "I need you to be very brave for a little longer. Can you do that?" Evie looked at Thomas on the pillow, picked him up, held him in both hands, then looked at Cole with the clear, undeceived eyes of a child who had already been braver than most people ever had to be, and who had discovered in the last day that bravery had a return, that it sometimes, not always, but sometimes found the one person in the world who would stop and sit down and wait. "Yeah," she said, "I can do that." Cole nodded. "Good," he said, "because Patricia Lowe is going to be here in about an hour, and what you tell her is going to matter more than anything that's happened so far." Evie held Thomas a little tighter. "Will you stay while I talk to her? She'll need to speak with you alone," Cole said. "That's how it works." Evie thought about that. "Will you be outside?" Cole looked at her for a long moment, at the bruise that was beginning to shift from its first terrible color into the slower changing color of something that was healing, at the girl who had chosen in an alley to trust him when she had every reason in the world not to. "I'll be right outside that door," he said. Evie nodded, settled Thomas in her lap, looked at the door, then back at Cole. "Okay," she said, "then I'm ready." And Cole Mercer, who had not cried since a cold night in Durango 11 years ago that he had never spoken about to anyone, felt his throat do something he chose not to examine too closely, and said nothing, and stayed exactly where he was, right there, right outside the door, exactly where he had said he would be. Patricia Lowe arrived at 12:40 in the afternoon carrying a leather briefcase and the quiet authority of someone who had spent 20 years in rooms where children told difficult truths and had learned over all those years how to make those rooms feel safe enough for the truth to come out. She was 61, gray-haired, with the kind of face that had done enough listening to become very good at it. She shook Cole's hand in the hallway, looked at him with the direct assessment of someone who made character evaluations for a living. "You're the one who found her," she said. "Yes," Cole said. "Evie's mentioned you 3 times since I walked onto the floor." Patricia said, "She wanted to make sure you were still outside. I told her I would be." Patricia looked at him for another moment. Then she said, "I have been doing this work for a long time, Mr. Mercer. I want you to know that what you did staying, documenting, making sure her account was protected before anyone could shape a different story, that's not something most people would have known to do." She paused. It may have saved more than her life. She went into Evie's room. The door closed behind her. Cole sat down on the bench against the wall and put his forearms on his knees and looked at the floor and waited. Garrett was downstairs near the entrance. Invisible the way Garrett had always been good at being invisible despite being 6'2" and built like a construction project. Logan was parked 3 blocks over monitoring the situation with the particular vigilance of a man who had spent 11 years anticipating problems before they arrived. The hospital corridor was quiet in the specific way that hospital corridors were quiet in the middle of the day. Not empty, but contained. Everyone moving with purpose. The sound dampened by that institutional neutrality that Cole had decided somewhere in the last 16 hours he would never take for granted again. Quiet was a privilege. He had never thought of it that way before. His phone showed 14 missed calls, 2 from numbers he now recognized as media. He ignored those. One from Diane II in 2 days, which meant she had updates. He would call her back. Not yet. One from a number he didn't recognize. Denver area code. He let it go to voicemail and then listened to the voicemail immediately. It was a woman. Her voice was careful and slightly formal. The voice of someone who had composed what they were going to say before they dialed. She said, "Mr. Mercer, my name is Ruth Callan. I live on Cascade Avenue, 2 blocks from the 5th Street alley. I saw a news clip this morning. I have something I should have come forward with sooner, and I didn't, and I'm sorry for that. I saw that woman's car in the alley on Thursday evening. I saw her walk the little girl in. I stood at my window and I watched, and I told myself it was probably nothing, and then I went back to watching television." A pause, long, weighted with the specific guilt of someone who has been carrying something and has decided they can't carry it anymore. "It wasn't nothing. I know that now. I should have called someone. I want to tell the police what I saw. If you can pass my number to whoever needs it, I'd appreciate it." She left her number twice, slowly, to make sure it was clear. Cole sat with the voicemail for a moment. Then he called Voss. Voss answered on the second ring. Cole played her the voicemail, the number and the name without preamble. Voss said, "I'll call her in the next 10 minutes. Then Cole, "Detective." The journal, she said, and she said it the way people say the one thing they have been waiting to say, the thing that changes the size of the room. "We executed a search of Vanessa Sterling's vehicle 40 minutes ago. Probable cause established based on Evie's statement in the security footage." A pause that Cole felt in his chest. "We found it." He said nothing. Just waited. It's a hardcover journal, dark blue cover. The entries began approximately 2 years ago, before Evie's mother was diagnosed. Voss's voice was very controlled, the voice of a detective who had seen things and learned to report them without letting the weight of them collapse the reporting. There are entries that document Vanessa's relationship with David Morrison prior to his wife's death. There are entries that describe conversations the mother had with David about Vanessa. There are entries. Voss stopped for one beat. There are entries that describe Vanessa's stated belief that once the mother was gone, she would step in. Those entries are specific enough in their language to be significant in a legal proceeding. Another pause. And there's one entry dated 6 weeks ago that references Evie directly. It describes Evie as an obstacle. Those are the words used. An obstacle. The word landed in the corridor like something thrown. "Vanessa is in custody," Voss said. "As of 45 minutes ago, child abandonment felony, child endangerment. And we're looking at additional charges depending on what the journal yields for the district attorney." She stopped. "The custody motion is void. David Morrison has full custody." Evie goes home with her father. Cole closed his eyes. He kept them closed for 3 seconds. Behind his eyelids, in the specific darkness of a man who has not slept properly in 36 hours and has been carrying the forward motion of this thing through sheer will and a 7-year-old's voice in his memory, he felt something release. Not everything. Not all at once, but enough, a pressure that had been constant since a cold alley and a flicker of light and a child's shoe visible behind a cardboard box. "Thank you, detective," he said. "Thank you," Voss said. And she meant it differently than most people meant it when they said it to him. He hung up, sat in the corner, let the information settle into its full dimensions. Vanessa Sterling had planned this, had taken the journal to remove the evidence, had left Evie in the alley as a calculated move in a longer game, had filed the report at 2:15 in the morning, not out of panic, but out of strategy, a preemptive strike built on the calculation that a Hells Angels president finding a missing child would be easier to spin than explain. She'd been smart and cold and completely wrong about one thing. She'd been wrong about Evie because Evie had talked. Evie had sat in a cold alley and looked at a man who didn't look trustworthy and decided her mother was right, and she had talked, and the talking had started something that Vanessa's careful architecture couldn't contain. The door to Evie's room opened. Patricia Lowe came out first. She looked at Cole with an expression that had moved past assessment into something quieter and more decided. "She's remarkable," Patricia said. It wasn't a professional observation. It was a personal one. The kind that slipped through when 20 years of guardedness met something that genuinely surprised it. Her account is completely consistent, detailed beyond what most adults could sustain under that kind of stress, and entirely without the markers of coach testimony. She paused. "She also told me that you sat on the wet pavement in that alley because you wanted her to feel like you weren't trying to tower over her." Cole said nothing. She noticed that Patricia said, "She told me she noticed it and that it was when she decided to trust you." She studied him for a moment. "I'm going to include that in my report." "You don't have to," Cole said. "I know I don't," Patricia said. "I want to." She picked up her briefcase. "Vanessa Sterling's petition is going to be dead by tomorrow morning, regardless of my report. But I want my report to reflect the complete picture of what happened, including the parts that don't make it into police documentation." She looked at him steadily, "Including the part where a man sat down on a wet alley floor at 10:15 at night because a 7-year-old needed to feel safe." She walked toward the elevator. Cole watched her go. Then he pushed open the door to Evie's room. Evie looked up immediately. She had clearly been watching the door. Her face was the face of a child who had just done something hard and was waiting to find out what it had cost or given. Her father was beside her holding her hand, his eyes moving to Cole with the same waiting quality. "Vanessa's been arrested," Cole said. He said it directly because they both deserve direct. "She's in custody. The journal was in her car." He looked at Evie. "You're going home with your dad." Evie stared at him. Something moved through her face in layers. The first layer, disbelief. Fast. The automatic response of a child who has learned not to trust good news. Then the second layer, slower. The layer where the disbelief begins to check itself against the face of the person delivering the information, looking for signs that it's real. Then the third layer, the one that broke Cole open cleanly and completely from the inside. Relief. Pure, enormous 7-year-old relief. The relief of a child who had survived something by keeping herself very tightly together and who had just been given finally the permission to come apart. Evie started crying, not quietly, not the controlled, practiced, calm crying she had done the night before. This was different. The full unlocked grief of a child who had been strong for far too long and had finally run out of reasons to keep being strong. She cried in the full-body way that children cry when they are finally safe enough to cry, which is the hardest kind to watch and the most necessary kind to allow. David Morrison gathered her in and held her and said nothing because there was nothing to say. And Cole stayed by back and turned toward the window and looked at his own hands and gave them the privacy of it. Because some moments didn't need a witness. Some moments needed to happen in the particular enclosed warmth of a father and daughter who had found each other on the other side of something terrible. And the most respectful thing Cole could do was be exactly as far away as necessary while remaining exactly as close as he'd promised. He stayed. The nurse came to begin discharge paperwork at 2 in the afternoon. The process took longer than it needed to because paperwork always did, and because David kept stopping to look at Evie as though he needed to keep verifying that she was there and real and present and coming home with him. Cole understood that. He had felt some version of it himself every time he walked back into that room and saw Evie's face turn toward the door with the specific alertness of a child checking whether the person she trusted had kept their word. He was in the hallway when his phone buzzed. Logan. Clip's been picked up nationally, Logan said without preamble. CNN ran it 18 minutes ago. They pulled the Channel 7 footage. You've got about 48 hours before the story becomes something neither of us can manage. Cole leaned against the wall. What do you mean, manage? I mean, people are going to have opinions about you, Logan said. Some of them are going to be good opinions. Some of them are going to be complicated opinions from people inside the life who think you've made the chapter into a news story. A pause. And some of them are going to be the right opinions from people who don't care about the patch and just saw a man do the right thing. Another pause. Shorter. Merc, your phone is going to ring a lot in the next week. It's already ringing a lot. More than this, Logan said. I just want you to be ready. Cole thought about what ready looked like after 36 hours of no sleep and a child's voice in a cold alley in Vanessa Sterling's journal and a guardian ad litem who had noted that he sat on wet pavement. He thought about what his life looked like from the outside. The patch, the history, the 30 years of road and reputation, and all the complicated truth of a life lived outside what most people would call the lines. He thought about whether any of it looked different to him now than it had 40 hours ago. It didn't. That was the honest answer. He was the same man, the same history, the same patch. What was different was not him. What was different was the specific night he had been given, which had cracked something open and shown him what was inside. And what was inside had turned out to be something he had not known with this clarity that he still possessed. I'm ready, he said. He went back into Evie's room as the nurse was finishing the discharge paperwork. Evie was dressed in her own clothes. David had gone home briefly and come back. Thomas was tucked under her arm with the ease of a child reuniting with something essential. She looked up when Cole came in, and the look on her face was the look that he was going to carry for the rest of his life. The look of a child who has been through the worst thing and has come out the other side and is looking at one of the specific people who helped make the other side reachable. We're going home, she said, like she was testing the words. Yeah, Cole said. You are. David stood and extended his hand. Cole shook it. The handshake lasted a beat longer than handshakes usually did. The specific wordless communication of two men who had been through something together and knew that words were not going to be sufficient, but were going to try anyway. I don't know how to, David started. You don't have to, Cole said. I do, though. David's voice was rough around the edges. I miss things. Things I should have seen. Vanessa was. He stopped, started again. I'm going to spend a long time making that right. Yeah, Cole said. You are. He said it without softness because David didn't need softness. He needed the truth, which was that the making right was going to be a long road, and it started now, and the length of it was not a punishment, but a direction. Evie's going to need you to be very present for a while, Cole said. She's going to need to know you're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere, David said. Tell her that, Cole said. Every day for a while. She needs to hear it more than she needs to hear anything else. David nodded. His jaw was tight with everything he was containing. Okay, he said. Okay. Evie had been watching this exchange with her two old eyes. Then she looked at Cole and said, You said you'd come back. I did, Cole said. Do you actually mean it, or is it the thing people say? The question was so precise, so Evie the specific vocabulary of a child who had learned the difference between the thing people say and the thing people mean, that Cole almost couldn't answer it for a moment. He crouched down, level with her, the same way he had crouched down in that alley on wet pavement at 10:15 at night when she had been behind a cardboard box and he had been a stranger. I actually mean it, he said. Evie studied him with the full seriousness of a 7-year-old making an assessment. Then she reached out and grabbed his hand, his big, scarred, tattooed hand in her small one, and held it for a moment. Not long, just long enough. Then she let go and looked at her father and said, I'm ready. Cole walked them out, not to the door. He gave them space for the final distance. Watch from inside as David held Evie's hand through the parking lot and Evie matched her steps to his, and the two of them moved toward his car with the specific gravity of people who are not going to take the small things for granted anymore. Not immediately, maybe, but for a while, long enough for it to matter. He stood at the window until the car was out of sight. Then he turned and walked back through the hospital, past Martinez at the desk, who caught his eye and gave him a small nod, past the waiting room where he had sat in a plastic chair the night before with terrible coffee and 11 missed calls, through the sliding glass doors and out into the cold Colorado afternoon. Logan was waiting by the bikes. He had driven Coles over at some point, which was the kind of thing Logan did without being asked and without mentioning. Cole looked at it for a moment, then at the city around them, then at the sky which had cleared while he was inside. Still cold, still the specific, uncompromising cold of a Colorado afternoon in the tail end of winter. But bright now, blue at the edges where the clouds had pulled back. She okay, Logan asked. She's going home, Cole said. Logan nodded. That was enough. Cole put on his jacket, swung onto the bike, felt the familiar weight of it, the familiar geometry of 30 years of this specific life settling back around him. He was the same man who had ridden through Colorado Springs the night before looking for nothing and found everything. He was the same man the patch said he was, and also the man the alley had shown him he still was underneath all of it. The man who stopped when something mattered, who sat on wet pavement when a child needed to feel less afraid, who stayed in plastic chairs until 3 in the morning because he had said he would, and it turned out that saying so was enough to be everything. He started the engine. Logan pulled up alongside him. Chapter meeting still tomorrow morning, Logan said. You gonna be there, I'll be there, Cole said. What are you going to tell them? Cole looked at the road ahead of him, at the straight, cold, honest line of it running forward into whatever came next. He thought about Evie's hand in his, about the weight of her in his arms on that 4-minute ride, about a journal in a dark blue cover that a dying woman had written because she had known something was wrong and had put it down in her own handwriting so that the truth would survive her. I'll tell them what happened, Cole said. Exactly what happened. And I'll tell them that the next time any one of them rides past an alley and something doesn't feel right, they stop. He paused. That's the whole lesson. You stop. Whatever it costs you, whatever it looks like, whatever story someone else tries to build around it afterward. You stop. He pulled out into traffic. Logan fell into place at his shoulder, the way Logan always did, the way Logan had for 11 years. They rode through Colorado Springs in the bright cold afternoon. 2 men in leather and patches who had started the night before looking for nothing and had found something that changed the weight of everything they had ever done and everything they would do after, not by making it smaller or larger, but by making it clearer, by proving on a specific Thursday night in a specific alley that the man inside the reputation was still the man who mattered most. 3 months later, Cole kept his word. He came back every 2 weeks, not as the man who saved her, not as a hero in some story that would eventually fade, but as something simpler and more permanent, as a friend, as someone who had been there on the worst night and had decided to keep being there after. They sat in David Morrison's living room, a modest house in a quiet neighborhood where children rode bikes and dogs barked, and life happened at the speed of normalcy, and they drank hot chocolate. Evie's choice. She always made it too sweet, and Cole never complained. She told him about school, about her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who let her read ahead in the chapter books, about a girl named Sophie who had become her best friend, about the science project on butterflies that she was working on with her dad. She didn't talk about Vanessa, not often, Sometimes the name came up, usually late in the conversation, usually when Evie was tired and her guard was down. Where is she, Evie would ask. And Cole would say, in prison, where she can't hurt you. And Evie would nod and go quiet for a moment and then ask about his motorcycle or Logan or something else that pulled her back to the present. David usually sat with them. Sometimes he made coffee for himself and Cole. Sometimes he just listened. He was different now, quieter, more present, the kind of different that came from almost losing something and deciding never to take it for granted again. One afternoon in late February, Evie asked Cole about Sarah. They were sitting on the couch. David was in the kitchen making sandwiches. Evie had been quiet for a few minutes, which was unusual. She was usually a talker, filling the space with observations and questions, and the specific, unfiltered commentary of a child who was learning that the world was safe enough to speak freely in. You told me about your sister once, Evie said. In the hospital. Cole remembered. He'd told her about Sarah in a moment of exhaustion and honesty, had told her things he hadn't told anyone in 20 years. I remember, Cole said. You said you didn't get to her in time. That's right. Evie looked at her hot chocolate, then at Cole. But you got to me in time, she said. Cole felt something move through his chest, not the crack from the alley, something that had been cracked and was now slowly, painfully beginning to heal. Yeah, he said. I did. Evie nodded, very serious. The way children nod when they've understood something important. I think that's good, she said. I think your sister would think that's good too. Cole couldn't speak for a moment. He looked at this 7-year-old 8. Now actually, her birthday had been 2 weeks ago, and he'd been there for the party, sitting awkwardly among children and parents who'd looked at his patches and then at Evie's face when she'd hugged him, and had apparently decided that whatever they thought they knew about him was less important than what she knew. And he realized something. Sarah would have liked Evie, would have recognized something in her. The stubbornness, the resilience, the refusal to let the worst things define everything. Thank you, Cole said, for saying that. Evie smiled, not the careful smile of a child trying to please an adult. The real one, the one that lit up her whole face. You're welcome, she said. David came back with sandwiches. The three of them ate together, talked about small things, made plans for Cole to take Evie to see his motorcycle up close next visit. Not to ride, David had said firmly, just to look. And Cole had agreed because that was the deal and he kept his deals. When it was time to leave, Evie walked Cole to the door. She hugged him, quick and fierce, then stepped back. 2 weeks, she asked. 2 weeks, Cole confirmed. Promise, promise. She watched him walk to his bike, waved from the doorway until he rode out of sight. The chapter meeting happened on a cold morning in mid-March, not the regular monthly meeting, a special session, called by Cole, attendance mandatory. All 16 leadership members were there, plus another 20 who'd heard something was happening and wanted to be present for it. Cole stood at the head of the table, looked at the faces around him. Men he'd ridden with for years, some for decades, men who'd been with him through everything. Most of you know what happened 3 months ago, Cole said. Some of you have opinions about it. That's fine. You're entitled to opinions. He paused. What you're not entitled to is making decisions that contradict what I'm about to tell you. The room was very quiet. We're making some changes, Cole said. Starting now, first change, any member of this chapter who sees a child in danger. Any child, any danger stops and helps. No exceptions, no calculations about visibility or risk or what it might cost us. You stop and you help. He looked around the table. Second change, we're establishing fund, chapter money, designated for family law cases, custody disputes, kids caught in bad situations. We're partnering with Diane Marsh's firm. When she identifies cases that need financial backing, we provide it. A man named Marcus, the one who challenged Cole 3 months ago, spoke up. We're not a charity, Merc. No, Cole agreed. We're not. We're a brotherhood. And part of brotherhood is protecting people who can't protect themselves. That's not charity. That's principle. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, then looked at the faces around the table, at the men nodding, at Torres and Garrett and Logan and the others who'd been there from the beginning. He sat back down. Third change, Cole said, is actually not a change at all. It's a reminder. He pulled something from his jacket, a photograph, the one from Channel 7, Cole holding Evie outside the hospital, her face buried in his shoulder, his arms around her. He put it on the table. This is who we are when it matters, he said. Not the reputation, not the headlines, not the things people say about us in courtrooms or police stations or anywhere else. He looked at each man in turn. We're the people who stop. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then Garrett stood up. I'm in, he said. Torres stood. Me too. One by one, the men around the table stood. Even Marcus. Last. But he stood. Cole nodded. Good, he said. Meeting's over. 8 months after the alley, the trial was quick. Vanessa Sterling's lawyer had tried every angle. Character assassination on Cole, challenging Evie's testimony, arguing that the journal entries were taken out of context. None of it worked. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. Child abandonment, child endangerment, conspiracy to commit fraud. And because the journal had revealed the depth of planning, because Catherine Morrison's final entries had documented her fears explicitly, because a dying woman's handwritten words carried weight that no lawyer could spin away, attempted murder of a minor. 12 years, eligible for parole in 8. Cole was in the courtroom when the sentence was read, not in the front, in the back, just present, just witnessing. Vanessa Sterling looked back as they let her out, found him in the crowd. Her face was hard, unrepentant, the face of someone who'd been caught, not someone who'd learned anything. Cole looked back, didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't show anything, just looked until she turned away. Outside the courthouse, David was waiting with Evie. The press was there. Cameras, reporters shouting questions. David ignored them, walked straight to Cole. Thank you, he said, for being here. Where else would I be? Cole asked. Evie hugged him. She was taller now, growing fast. Still had Thomas, though he was looking more worn, more loved. Is it over? She asked. Yeah, Cole said. It's over. Good. She stepped back, looked up at him with those eyes that weren't quite as old as they'd been 8 months ago. Still serious, still observant, but lighter somehow, like someone had lifted weight off that she'd been carrying too long. Can we go get ice cream? She asked her dad. David laughed. Yeah, we can go get ice cream. They started to walk away. Then Evie turned back. Cole. He looked at her. You're still coming next week, right, for my school thing? She was giving a presentation about butterflies, about metamorphosis, about how things can transform into something completely different while still being themselves. She'd asked if he would come. He'd said yes. I'll be there, he said. Promise, promise. She grinned and ran to catch up with her dad. Cole watched them go, then turned toward his bike where Logan was waiting. How you feeling? Logan asked. Cole thought about it. Thought about a cold alley and a cardboard box and a small voice saying, are you going to take me back to her? Thought about a hospital waiting room and Voss saying, don't let anyone take that away from you. Thought about Evie's hand in his and the way she'd said, I think your sister would think that's good too. Thought about 30 years on the road and all the things he'd done and all the things he'd been, and the one night that had shown him he was still capable of being the person he needed to be when it mattered most. I'm good, he said, and meant it. They rode out of the parking lot, past the reporters, past the cameras, past all the noise of a story that would eventually fade from headlines and become just one more thing that happened once in Colorado Springs. But for Cole Mercer, for Evie Morrison, for David, for Logan, for everyone who'd been there in the real moments when the real decisions were made, it would never fade. It would be the night everything changed, the night someone stopped. 1 year later. Cole was 51, still president of the Rocky Mountain Charter, still rode the same roads, still wore the same patch. But something fundamental had shifted in the chapter. Not dramatically, not in ways that made headlines, but in the small accumulations that eventually become culture. Members volunteered at youth centers, mentored kids from broken homes, showed up at family court hearings to support fathers fighting for custody, mothers escaping abuse. The fund Diane Marsh administered had helped 17 families in its first year. Custody cases, legal fees, safe housing deposits. People started to notice. The city, the police, even some of the press. There were still problems, still incidents, still the complicated reality of an organization that existed in the spaces between legal and not. But there was also this when Officer Delgado pulled over a chapter member for a broken taillight 6 months after the trial, and the member mentioned he was running late to pick up his kid from school. Delgado had let him go with a warning. "Tell Cole I said hi," Delgado had said. The member had reported it back to Cole confused. Cole had just smiled. Things were changing. Slowly, but changing. Evie's 9th birthday. Cole showed up with a present, a leather journal, dark blue like her mother's, with her name embossed on the cover in gold. "For your thoughts," he said when she opened it. "Your mom kept one? I thought maybe you'd want to start one too." Evie looked at it for a long moment, ran her fingers over her name, then looked up at Cole with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "This is the best present anyone's ever given me." That night after the party, after the cake and the guests and the chaos of 9-year-olds hyped up on sugar, Evie wrote her first entry. Cole never asked what she wrote. That was private. That was hers. But years later, when Evie was grown and had a daughter of her own, she would show that journal to her child. And the first entry read, "Today I turned 9. Cole gave me this journal. He's the person who found me in the alley when I was 7. He's the person who stopped when everyone else would have driven past. He's the person who kept every promise he ever made to me." Mom used to say you can't judge people by how they look. She was right. Cole looks scary. He's a biker with tattoos and patches, and he's big and loud and rides a motorcycle. But he's the kindest person I know. He saved my life. But more than that, he showed me that the world has people in it who will stop, who will sit down on wet ground and wait, who will keep promises, who will come back. I want to be that kind of person when I grow up. I want to be like Cole. 5 years after the alley, Diane called Cole, not Diane Marsh the lawyer, Diane Reston, his sister. "I saw the article," she said, "about the chapter's community work, about what you've been doing." "It's not a big deal," Cole said. "It is, though," Diane said. "It's exactly the kind of big deal that Sarah would have been proud of." Cole was quiet for a moment. "You think so, I know," so Diane said. "You couldn't save her, Cole, but you've saved a lot of other people since. That matters. That matters more than you know." After they hung up, Cole sat in his apartment and looked at a picture on his wall. The only picture he kept displayed. It was the photograph from the hospital. Him holding Evie, her face buried in his shoulder. Underneath it, he'd taped a smaller photo, one he'd carried in his wallet for 32 years. Sarah at 14, smiling before everything went wrong. "I got to 1 in time," he said to the photograph. "I hope that's enough." The room was quiet, but somewhere in that quiet, Cole felt something that had been broken for a very long time begin finally to resemble peace. 10 years after the alley. Evie Morrison was 17, about to graduate high school, planning to study social work in college, wanted to work with children in the system, kids like she'd almost been. Cole came to her graduation, sat in the back with Logan, watched as she walked across the stage and accepted her diploma and the scholarship she'd earned for academic excellence. After the ceremony, she found him in the crowd. She was taller than he'd ever imagined she'd be, confident, strong, still serious when it mattered, still had that same clarity in her eyes. "You came," she said. "Of course I came," Cole said. I promised, didn't I? She hugged him, held on longer than usual. Thank you, she said into his shoulder, for everything, for that night, for every visit, for showing me what kept promises look like. Cole felt his throat tighten. You did all the hard work, Evie. I just stopped. You did more than stop, she said. She pulled back, looked at him. You stayed. That's the part that mattered most. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the sun set over Colorado Springs, Cole stood in the parking lot and watched Evie drive away with her father. Logan appeared at his shoulder. You good, Logan asked. Cole thought about a cold alley 10 years ago, about a small voice asking if he was going to take her back, about crackers and a rabbit, and the specific desperation of a child who decided to survive alone. He thought about how that child had become this young woman, strong, whole, ready to help other children the way she'd been helped. He thought about Sarah, about how she'd never gotten the chance to become this, how she'd been lost in the same system Evie had almost been lost in. He thought about how saving Evie hadn't brought Sarah back, hadn't erased the past, hadn't fixed everything that was broken, but it had fixed something. Something important. Yeah, Cole said. I'm good. They rode out of the parking lot, into the twilight, into the rest of their lives. And for once, maybe for the first time in 32 years, Cole Mercer felt like the man he was and the man he'd needed to be were finally the same person. Not because he'd stopped being who he was, but because he discovered that who he was had always included the capacity to stop, to sit down on wet pavement, to keep promises, to stay. And sometimes in the right moments with the right people, that was enough to change everything. 20 years after the alley, Cole Mercer was 70 years old, retired from the chapter presidency. Logan had taken over. The torch had passed. Cole still rode. Not as much, not as far, but he rode. He lived in a small house outside Colorado Springs. Quiet neighborhood. Garden in the back that he actually maintained. Life that looked nothing like the one he'd lived for 50 years. One afternoon in November, a car pulled up to his house. Evie Morrison stepped out. Except she wasn't Evie Morrison anymore. She was Evie Thompson, married, social worker, director of a nonprofit that helped children in foster care. And she was pregnant, 7 months, a girl. I wanted to ask you something, she said after they'd settled on his porch with coffee. Okay, Cole said. We're naming her Catherine, after my mom. She paused. But I want her middle name to be something that honors you. What's your mother's name? Cole looked at her. My mother and I weren't close, he said carefully. Okay, then what about Sarah, your sister? Cole felt something break open in his chest, something that had been sealed for 50 years. Sarah, he repeated. Catherine Sarah Thompson, Evie said, if that's okay with you. Cole couldn't speak. Evie reached over and took his hand, the same way she had in the hospital 20 years ago, small hand in his large one. Except now her hand wasn't small anymore. It was strong, capable. The hand of a woman who'd survived and thrived and decided to spend her life helping others survive and thrive. You saved my life, Evie said. I want my daughter to have part of your sister's name, so she knows where she comes from, so she understands that the world has people in it who stop. Cole looked at this woman who'd been a 7-year-old in an alley, who trusted him when she had no reason to, who'd become everything good in the world. Sarah would be honored, he said, and so am I. They sat on the porch as the sun set over Colorado, talking about small things, about the baby, about Evie's work, about David who'd remarried and was happy, about Logan and the chapter and the fun that had helped hundreds of families now. Before she left, Evie hugged him. I love you, she said. I hope you know that. Cole held her for a moment. This person he had found in an alley, this person who'd saved him as much as he'd saved her. I love you too, he said, and meant it with everything he was. After she drove away, Cole sat on his porch and looked at the sky, at the stars coming out, at the vast, cold, beautiful darkness that held everything. He thought about Sarah, about how she'd be 50 now if she'd lived, about how she'd never gotten the chance to grow up, fall in love, have children, build a life. But her name would live on in a little girl who would be born in 2 months, who would grow up hearing stories about an uncle named Cole who rode motorcycles and kept promises, who would learn that the world could be cruel, but that it also held people who stopped, who would carry Sarah's name forward into a future that Sarah never got to see. I got there in time, Cole said to the stars, to Sarah, to whoever was listening, not for you, and I'll never stop being sorry about that, but I got there in time for her, and she's going to name her daughter after you. So in a way, you get to keep going. You get to be part of something good. The stars didn't answer, but in the quiet of that Colorado night, with the cold pressing in and the engine of his Harley cooling in the driveway and the weight of 50 years on the road settling into something that felt almost like peace, Cole Mercer finally had allowed himself to believe something he'd been too broken to believe for most of his life. That second chances existed. That redemption was possible. That you could carry the weight of failing someone you loved for 32 years and still in the end find a way to honor them. All it took was stopping. One night, one alley, one child who needed someone to sit down on wet pavement and wait. And from that single decision, everything else had followed. The chapter's transformation, Evie's survival, Sarah's name living on. All of it traced back to one moment, one choice. Stop. Cole Mercer had spent 50 years riding past things, but on one cold Thursday night in November, he had stopped. And that had made all the difference.